Chapter 111. As he spoke, Xiang Wuji walked out of one of the rooms. He was still wearing his long purple robes. His snow-white hair and beard were stained with bits of medicinal herbs and powder. Even though he was not polite to Ji Tianxing, his gaze when he looked at Xianxian was full of affection. His wrinkled face was full of smiles. Being punished to sweep the floor? Xianxian looked with surprise at Ji Tianxing. She wanted to laugh when she saw Ji Tianxing's gloomy expression, but she held it in. She walked under the eaves with the food box and bowed to Xiang Wuji. She said with a slight smile, "Grandmaster, this is the dessert that Xianxian personally made for you. Please try it." Xiang Wuji smiled even more happily. He hurriedly took the food box and said with a gratified expression, "Aya, of the juniors in the sect, little Xianxian is the most sensible. Not only do you often come to visit this old man, you also bring gifts for this old man. This old man likes to eat the desserts that little Xianxian makes." Xianxian gave a faint smile and hurriedly explained, "Grandmaster, it is not that the Shixiang and Shiji are not willing to visit you. It is that you do not allow them to come to Great and Palace to avoid disturbing your peace." Xiang Wuji's smile disappeared and he frowned. He said exasperatedly, "Those little brats say they are coming to visit this old man. Which one of them is not thinking about this old man's spirit medicines and treasures? All of them pretend to be gentlemen. Do you think they can hide their intentions from this old man? They are so young yet they do not cultivate and always want to take shortcuts. This old man scolding them is already light." Xianxian explained with a slight smile, and this caused Xiang Wuji's anger to dissipate. Then Xiang Wuji took the food box and turned to enter the room. Xianxian did not follow him into the room. She sat on the stone bench under the eaves and asked Ji Tianxing with a slight smile, "Tianxing, you have just entered the sect a few days ago. How did you make a mistake and be punished to sweep Great and Palace? Is it because you do not understand the rules of the sect and committed some taboo?" Ji Tianxing looked at her clear eyes and could feel her worry and concern. He had no doubt that if he told her that he had been framed, Xianxian would be even more worried. Thinking of this, he did not explain anything. He only nodded and said, "Yes, after all, I'm new here. But now, I know what I'm doing. I won't do it again." "Yes, I believe you." Xianxian smiled and nodded. She saw the 1,000 directions set in Ji Tianxing's hands and asked, "Did Attendant Han ask you to learn pill recipes and concoct medicine again?" "That's right." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "I have to learn how to concoct medicine this week and take the alchemy assessment at the end of the month." Xianxian's beautiful eyes turned. She said with a slight smile, "You have to clean Great and Palace and learn the 1,000 directions set at the same time. I'm afraid you will not be able to do it. If you have any questions, you can ask me. I can help you answer them. I learned all this back then." Ji Tianxing smiled and cupped his hands. "If that's the case, then I'll have to thank junior apprentice Sister Xianxian." "It's nothing." Xianxian nodded and smiled gently. At this time, Xiang Wuji walked out of the room and came to Xianxian's side. "Little Xianxian, come and let Grandmaster take a look at your illness. How is your recovery?" Xianxian nodded obediently and stretched out her right hand. Xiang Wuji stretched out 2 fingers and placed them on her wrist, helping her check her pulse. Ji Tianxing stood to the side and watched silently. His heart was complicated and many thoughts flashed through his mind. Junior apprentice Sister Xianxian looks so gentle and kind. How can she be ill? Her body is unwell and she is ill, but she still cares for me so much? After a while, Xiang Wuji retracted his fingers and a gratified smile appeared on his face. "Yes, not bad. In this half a month, little Xianxian, you have more or less recovered. The extreme cold poison has also been completely removed. I really didn't expect that this old man's herb garden would have so many spirit herbs and miraculous medicines, but none of them could cure your illness. However, the red star flower is compatible with your natal attribute. It can remove the extreme cold poison in your body and prevent you from being tortured by it in the future." Hearing Xiang Wuji's words, Ji Tianxing's expression changed and a flash of light flashed across his eyes. Many thoughts flashed through his mind and he finally understood. So, junior apprentice Sister Xianxian's illness is due to the extreme cold poison in her body, and the red star flower can help her get rid of it. This means that when Yun Yao obtained the red star flower stamen, she used it to treat junior apprentice Sister Xianxian's illness. Both Xianxian and I have consumed the red star flower, and our bodies have been transformed by the red star flower's medicinal power. No wonder when I first met her, I felt an inexplicable sense of closeness. So, the two of us are fated to be together. Ji Tianxing finally understood the reason. He also vaguely guessed that Xianxian and Yun Yao must have a close relationship. After checking on Xianxian's condition, Xiang Wuji gave a few more instructions and turned around to get busy in the alchemy room. He originally wanted Xianxian to go to the alchemy room with him and help him look after the alchemy furnace and learn alchemy at the same time. However, Xianxian found an excuse to reject him. After Xiang Wuji left, Xianxian stayed in the courtyard to accompany Ji Tianxing and help him explain the contents of the Thousand Directions book. With Xianxian's help, Ji Tianxing did not need to flip through the Thousand Directions book and saved a lot of time. As he cleaned the courtyard, he listened to Xianxian's explanation of alchemy and learned more deeply and thoroughly. He was also in a good mood. Unknowingly, an afternoon passed. After the sun set, Ji Tianxing and Xianxian walked out of the Great and Palace side by side and were about to return to their respective residences. However, just as the two of them reached the entrance of the Great and Palace, they were stopped by a handsome young man in a white robe. This handsome young man was Lu Mingyang, who had just entered the inner sect. Lu Mingyang held a sandalwood box in his hands, and it was obvious that he had been waiting outside for a long time. When he saw Xianxian walk out of the door, he immediately welcomed her with a face full of smiles. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly saw Ji Tianxing, who was beside Xianxian. Seeing Ji Tianxing and Xianxian talking and laughing as they walked side by side, the smile on his face instantly froze and his eyes turned gloomy. At this time, Ji Tianxing and Xianxian also saw Lu Mingyang and stopped in their tracks. The two of them did not speak as they calmly looked at Lu Mingyang. Lu Mingyang retracted the coldness in his eyes and hurriedly revealed a gentle smile as he said to Xianxian, "Xianxian, I knew that you came to the Great and Palace today and specially came here to wait for you. This is the 1,000 years fire jade that I spent a lot of time and effort to collect. Even if it cannot help you get rid of the cold poison, it can help you reduce your pain. Xianxian, this is my kind intentions, you must accept it." Lu Mingyang fawned over Xianxian, and his tone and expression showed that he was extremely concerned. However, Xianxian was indifferent to his words. After Lu Mingyang finished speaking, she then calmly said, "Take it back, I will not accept your gift. Moreover, the cold poison in my body has already been removed, you don't have to worry about it." Saying this, she turned her head to look at Ji Tianxing and smiled as she said goodbye and quickly left. Chapter 112. Xianxian's cold attitude made the smile on Lu Mingyang's face freeze. He looked at Xianxian's back as she left, and the expression on his face slowly turned cold. Recalling Ji Tianxing and Xianxian walking side by side, talking and laughing, the anger in his heart burned even more. When Xianxian's back disappeared at the end of the tree-lined path, Lu Mingyang suddenly turned around and glared at Ji Tianxing coldly. "Ji Tianxing, how do you know Xianxian? And you're so close to her?" His expression and eyes were very gloomy, and his tone was cold and angry. Ji Tianxing glanced at him and said expressionlessly, "What? We're all from the same sect, isn't it normal for us to know each other?" "Normal my ass." Lu Mingyang's face was livid, and he completely tore off his gentle and refined disguise, and cursed in anger. "I think you have ulterior motives and purposely got close to Xianxian." As he spoke, he took 2 steps forward in front of Ji Tianxing and shouted with a ferocious face, "Ji Tianxing, I'm warning you, stay away from Xianxian in the future. You're just a trash from a broken country, you don't have the qualifications to get close to Xianxian, you don't even have the qualifications to stand beside her. If you dare to pester Xianxian in the future, I won't be polite to you." Lu Mingyang's tone was incomparably arrogant, and he clenched his fists, almost unable to suppress the anger in his heart. But Ji Tianxing still looked at him indifferently, and only after he finished speaking did he reveal a contemptuous sneer. "Lu Mingyang, Whether I have the qualifications to be friends with Xian Xian, it has nothing to do with you. So what if you're the prince of Changfeng country? Xian Xian and I hit it off at first sight, and we talk happily, but she doesn't care about you. Even if you try your best to please Xian Xian, but she doesn't have any good feelings for you. In her eyes, you're no different from the dirt and weeds on the roadside. Only a shameless fellow like you would be so thick-skinned and shameless as to pester her. Can't you tell that Xian Xian hates you? You're already an adult. How can you be so shameless? Don't you know what shame is? Listening to Ji Tianxing's words that didn't contain a single curse word, yet every single word was heart-wrenching. Lu Mingyang was immediately enraged, and his eyes were bloodshot. Ji Tianxing, you're fucking courting death. Lu Mingyang could no longer hold back his anger. With a roar, he waved his fists and smashed them toward Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing sneered contemptuously and immediately retreated. However, Lu Mingyang was a LV1 Tongxian realm martial artist after all. His fists were surging with crimson fire true yuan, bursting with a violent force. Ji Tianxing's retreating speed slowed down a bit, and his chest was swept by the fist's chi, and a large part of his robe was scorched by the flame true essence. If his speed was any slower, he would have been injured by Lu Mingyang on the spot. Ji Tianxing, today I'm going to break your legs. Lu Mingyang sneered with a ferocious face, and once again threw his fists at Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing's face was solemn, and a cold light surged in his eyes. Even though he had reached LV6 True Energy Realm, without the Black Dragon Sword, he was still no match for Lu Mingyang. At this critical moment, he could only use his trump card and activate the sword chi in his body. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. 6 streaks of dark golden sword chi flew out from his palms, and instantly split into 12 streaks. They circled around his body and formed a sword net. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The dense golden sword chi and sword light enveloped a 3-meter radius around him, making a sharp piercing sound. Lu Mingyang's fists smashed into the sword net, and the crimson fire true yuan blasted a large hole in the sword net, and several streaks of sword chi were sent flying. Those dark golden sword chi pierced Lu Mingyang's fists, but were unable to hurt him. Ha! Little bastard, continue to be arrogant? Now do you know the difference between true energy realm and mystic realm? If you know what's good for you, kneel down and beg for mercy. Lu Mingyang swung his fists at the sword net, and sneered at Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing's face was as cold as ice. He clenched his teeth and silently controlled the sword net to block Lu Mingyang's fierce attacks. Bang bang bang. A series of muffled noises burst out one after another as Lu Mingyang blasted out large holes in the sword net of flowing light. Ji Tianxing was forced to retreat, and his face was getting paler and paler. Finally, after 36 consecutive punches, Lu Mingyang roared and used his ultimate move. Raging Flame Fist. Dazzling flames surged out of his body, and he gathered all his power on his fists, forming 2 balls of crimson fire, and punched towards Ji Tianxing. With a muffled bang, the sword net was shattered by the 2 balls of scarlet flames. Ji Tianxing did not have time to dodge, and was about to be hit by the 2 balls of crimson fire. At this critical moment, a dark green sword aura flew out from Graydon Palace, and quickly arrived between the 2 of them. Phew! That 2-meter-long green sword aura carried a terrifying power, and instantly hit Lu Mingyang's fists. Ji Tianxing only saw a green light flash in front of his eyes, and heard a bang sound. Then he saw Lu Mingyang being sent flying. Lu Mingyang drew an arc in the air, and fell into the forest 5 meters away. He rolled a few times before coming to a stop. He struggled a few times before crawling out of the forest. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, his hair was messy, and his white robe was stained with mud. He looked very pathetic. He looked at Graydon Palace with fear and then staggered away. But before he left, he glared at Ji Tianxing with hatred. He clearly remembered this grudge, and would definitely find a chance to take revenge in the future. Ji Tianxing looked at Lu Mingyang's retreating figure. His face darkened, and he secretly clenched his fists. He knew very well that if the stinky old man had not saved him at the critical moment, he would have been injured by Lu Mingyang. At this moment, his heart was filled with a strong desire to become stronger. No matter what, He had to increase his strength and reach the mystic comprehending state as soon as possible. Swoosh! A green light flashed, and Xiang Wuji suddenly flew out from Graydon Palace and landed beside Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing came to his senses and hurriedly bowed. He said sincerely, "Thank you for saving me, senior." Xiang Wuji did not reply. He glared at him angrily and scolded, "You little bastard, you are really stupid. You are infuriating me. Such a miraculous sword chi, but you used it so crudely. What a waste of such a great talent. And your family's sword art, called the 10 Mystery Sword Art, don't use it in the future?" Ji Tianxing looked at Xiang Wuji innocently. He didn't know why this old man was looking at him with such disappointment. "What are you looking at?" Xiang Wuji glared at him again and scolded, "Don't go back to the Wind Cloud Courtyard tonight. Come with me, I will teach you 2 sword arts." Begging for recommendation tickets, begging to be added to the bookshelf, please everyone. Chapter 113. Stupid old man wants to teach me swordsmanship? Ji Tianxing was stunned. He could not believe it. Xiang Wuji had always been strict with him. He would scold him if he did not get his way. If Xiang Wuji could talk to him nicely, he would be thanking the heavens. He did not expect that Xiang Wuji would take the initiative to teach him swordsmanship. Although he was not sure of Xiang Wuji's identity, he had seen Xiang Wuji's moves. They were truly mysterious and unheard of. How could he not be surprised and excited that such a mysterious expert was going to teach him swordsmanship? What are you waiting for? Come in quickly. Xiang Wuji walked into Great Peace Palace with his hands behind his back and shouted impatiently. Ji Tianxing regained his senses and hurried into the Great Peace Palace. He followed Xiang Wuji into the 3rd courtyard. The sky was already dark and night was about to fall. Xiang Wuji stood in the middle of the courtyard. His feet stepped on the limestone floor and he exuded a mysterious and powerful aura. "Kid, I am going to teach you the Flying Star Sword technique." This sword technique has a total of 9 moves. When practiced to the extreme, it has the power to split the sky and split the earth. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes lit up, revealing a look of anticipation. "Senior, have you practiced this sword chi before? Is the Flying Star Sword technique also a sword technique to control sword chi?" Xiang Wuji glanced at him and said in a low voice, "Of course, I did not have the opportunity to practice the sword chi in your body. Otherwise, I would have broken through the shackles and entered a higher realm. The Flying Star Sword technique that I am going to teach you is a sword technique that I created in 20 years. It is used to control sword radiance. Although only Primal Core Realm experts can practice and use the Flying Star Sword technique, your sword chi is very special. However, your sword chi is very special, so you can also cultivate this sword technique." After hearing his explanation, Ji Tianxing was enlightened. He nodded to show that he understood. He thought to himself, "It seems that the stupid old man has heard of the way of the sword that I practice. He just did not have the opportunity to practice it. My Tao of the Sword Heart is even more miraculous than ordinary martial arts. With my strength at the true energy stage, I can actually cultivate a Yuan Dan stage sword technique. If I can master the Flying Star Sword Art, I will definitely be stronger than an ordinary martial artist using the Flying Star Sword Art." At this moment, Xiang Wuji said seriously, "Kid, I'll teach you the first 2 moves of the Flying Star Sword technique tonight. As for the remaining 7 moves, it will depend on your comprehension ability before I decide whether to teach them to you. You have to open your eyes wide and watch carefully. This old man will only display it once. Whether or not you can master it will depend on your talent and comprehension ability." Ji Tianxing immediately restrained his thoughts and did not dare to think about it anymore. He stared at Xiang Wuji with his eyes wide open, afraid that he would miss some moves in the dark. Xiang Wuji stood there with a serious expression for a moment. He secretly activated the true Yuan in his body and prepared to practice the Flying Star Sword Art. An incomparably majestic true essence rushed through his body, and it actually emitted a thunderous rumbling sound. Obviously, its power was extremely terrifying. "Brat, watch carefully. First move, Thousand Feather Blade." Xiang Wuji suddenly roared and waved his hands, sending out 3 dark green sword lights. As his hands danced, he formed a sword seal and drew a mysterious arc in the air, and the 3 green sword lights also danced in the air. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 3 streaks of green sword light dispersed and launched an incomparably swift and fierce attack from different angles and directions. Although the 3 sword lights danced within 10 meters of him, each sword light's attack path and trajectory were different, leaving behind a trail of green light in the night. As Xiang Wuji's hands moved, the 3 sword lights attacked continuously in midair at the speed of lightning. All of a sudden, with Xiang Wuji as the center, a radius of 10 meters was illuminated by the dazzling sword aura, filled with crisscrossing green flowing light. In just 5 breaths, the 3 sword lights attacked from different angles and directions over 1,000 times. Ji Tianxing's eyes widened in shock, and his heart raced. He felt that this was unbelievable. In 5 breaths, the 3 sword lights attacked over 1,000 times. No wonder this move is called Thousand Feather Blade. No matter how strong the opponent is, he can't block over 1,000 attacks in 5 breaths. He will definitely be shredded into pieces by the sword lights. The power of this Thousand Feather Blade is too terrifying. The Flying Star Sword art is indeed powerful. At the same time, Xiang Wuji finished practicing the Thousand Feather Blade. The 3 green sword lights flew back to him and quietly floated in the air. Xiang Wuji turned to Ji Tianxing and shouted, "Brat, did you see it clearly? I will give you 100 breaths to remember and analyze." Ji Tianxing didn't speak. He closed his eyes and silently recalled. Every movement and detail of Xiang Wuji's Thousand Feather Blade appeared in his mind one by one. After a full 100 breaths, over 1,000 images appeared in his mind, and he finally remembered all the details of the Thousand Feather Blade. Just as he opened his eyes and was about to speak, Xiang Wuji growled again. "Brat, look carefully." The second move, Wind and Thunderstrike. Xiang Wuji waved his hands again. His index and middle fingers closed together to form a sword technique. He drew a mysterious path in front of him. The 3 green sword lights in front of him suddenly turned into 2 and became even bigger. They were at least 2 meters long. Swoosh, swoosh. The 2 huge sword auras flew out 10 meters away and slashed at the ground from midair, erupting with an incomparably terrifying power. At that moment, the 2 sword lights shone brightly and created a violent hurricane. The entire yard was filled with sand and pebbles. Boom! A deafening noise. The blinding light and the hurricane blended together. Like a shocking thunder, the sword lights slammed into the green stone floor. Instantly, a 3-meter-wide crater appeared on the blue stone floor, with gravel and dust flying everywhere. The terrifying power traveled into the ground and caused the entire yard to shake violently. It was as if there was an earthquake. In the blink of an eye, the 2 green sword lights flew back to Xiang Wuji and disappeared into his palms. He had finished practicing the second move, Wind and Thunderstrike. Even though this move was simpler and more violent than the Thousand Feather Blade, its power was even more terrifying. Ji Tianxing stared dumbfoundedly at the huge pit in the courtyard and the dust that filled the air. His heart was filled with shock. He silently fantasized about when he could reach such a level of power. One sword move could shake the earth. At this time, Xiang Wuji turned around and walked back under the eaves. Seeing his face full of shock and yearning, he said indifferently, "You're right. I don't want to destroy my own yard. I only use 10% of my power. Study it well. After 100 breaths, show it to me." Chapter 114. 10% of his power is already so terrifying? Ji Tianxing's expression changed as he became even more shocked. If the stinky old man uses all his power, wouldn't he be able to level the entire Great End Palace in the blink of an eye? This is too terrifying. Just what realm has his strength reached? Origin Core Realm? Or the legendary Heaven Origin Realm? After a while, he finally calmed down. He did not dare to let his imagination run wild. He hurriedly closed his eyes to comprehend the Wind and Thunderstrike. While the Wind and Thunderstrike is not as complicated as the Thousand Feather Blade, this sword technique focuses on the method of exerting power. Soon, 100 breaths passed. Xiang Wuji stood under the roof and looked calmly at Ji Tianqing. There was a hint of anticipation in his eyes. Ji Tianqing opened his eyes. He calmly walked to the middle of the yard and stood still. He circulated the vital essence in his body. Swish, swish, swish. 3 flashes of sword energy appeared in front of him. They gave off a dark gold light in the dark night. Ji Tianqing put his index and middle fingers together and formed a sword technique. He quickly waved his hands in a profound pattern to control the 3 flashes of sword energy. Swish, swish, swish. The sword chi made a sharp sound as it pierced through the air. It circled and danced in the air within 3 meters around him, attacking and assassinating from all directions and angles. His hands moved faster and faster, gradually leaving behind afterimages. The speed of the 3 flashes of sword energy also reached an extreme. They attacked as fast as lightning, and their angles and trajectories became more and more cunning. 10 breaths passed quickly. The 3 flashes of sword energy attacked more than 1,000 times. Ji Tianqing finished practicing the 1,000 feather blade. He had used too much vital essence and his face was slightly pale. He waved his hand and called the 3 flashes of sword energy back to his side. They floated in the air. While he used twice the time to control the sword energy to attack more than 1,000 times, he had already mastered the 1,000 feather blade. However, he had already grasped the embryonic form of the 1,000 feather blade. When he used this sword technique, it was already 60 to 70% similar. Even though his sword energy was still very weak and could not be compared to Xiang Wuji's azure sword energy. But in the future, when he was strong enough, he would be able to achieve the same effect and power as Xiang Wuji. At this moment, Xiang Wuji spoke calmly. Kid, although you use twice the time and the power of your sword chi is somewhat weak, you have already learned the basics of this 1,000 feather blade. You managed to successfully execute the 1,000 feather blade just by watching me demonstrate it once, and you even managed to replicate it to a certain extent. As for your talent and comprehension, it's still passable. Although Xiang Wuji said that, he was actually very satisfied with Ji Tianqing. He knew very well that geniuses like Ji Tianqing, who could learn the 1,000 feather blade after only seeing it once, were rare in the Sky Pillar sect. Moreover, he had always been harsh with his words and rarely praised others. Ji Tianqing had already surpassed the majority of the Sky Pillar sect's disciples to receive his SOSO evaluation. Xiang Wuji raised his eyebrows and said expressionlessly, "All right, let's continue with the second move." The wind lightning strike seems simpler than the 1,000 feather blade, but it's actually much more profound and mysterious. Ji Tianqing also understood this point, so his expression was somewhat dignified. After taking a deep breath, he began to circulate his sword chi. Swish swish. The 3 dark golden sword chi turned into 2 and doubled in size from the size of a toothpick to the size of a dagger. Wind lightning strike. Ji Tianqing formed a sword seal with both hands and suddenly let out a low roar as he controlled the 2 sword chi to slash forward. Swish swish. The 2 sword chi flew 3 meters away, one on the left and one on the right, bursting with powerful energy as they slashed fiercely at the ground. Bang! With a dull sound, the dark golden sword chi mixed with the violent wind and struck the bluestone floor like a chopstick-sized lightning bolt. A half-meter-long crack appeared on the hard bluestone floor, and a few pieces of gravel flew out. After completing the wind lightning strike, Ji Tianqing recalled the 2 sword chi and put them back into his palms. Looking at the half-meter-long crack on the ground, he scratched his head awkwardly. After all, Xiang Wuji's wind lightning strike was extremely powerful, and it blasted a 3-meter-wide crater on the ground. On the other hand, his wind lightning strike was so weak that it only left a crack on the bluestone floor. The difference between the 2 of them was at least 10 times greater. The stinky old man's wind lightning strike was like a combination of wind and lightning. It caused the entire house to shake. The wind lightning he used was like the lightning in the sky, and the wind lightning I used was like a weak electric snake. I wonder how many years I will have to train hard to reach the stinky old man's level? Ji Tianqing sighed in his heart before he returned to the house and looked at Xiang Wuji anxiously. "Senior, look at the wind lightning strike I used just now. Did I learn it?" Xiang Wuji turned his head and stared at him. He sneered disdainfully, Do you think you have learned it? It's all in appearance, but all in appearance. The wind lightning strike that I used was like the lightning in the sky, but the wind lightning strike that you used was like a fart. Ji Tianxing looked embarrassed. He could only smile embarrassedly. Xiang Wuji snorted coldly, retracting his cold smile. Then, he casually said, however, you can be considered to have learned the basics of the wind lightning strike. At least your fart is loud, unlike little Xian Xian's grandfather. He learned it from me 3 times, but he can't even fart. Although Xiang Wuji always used farts to describe this sword technique, Ji Tianxing's attention was not on this question. Senior, who is Xian Xian's grandfather? Of course it's the elder. Xiang Wuji replied instinctively, but he stopped halfway. He suddenly turned his head and stared at Ji Tianxing. He scolded angrily, "You little bastard, are you trying to trick me?" Cough cough. Definitely not. Ji Tianxing waved his hands and denied it. All right, stop talking nonsense. Xiang Wuji frowned and warned in a deep voice, although you have learned the basics of these 2 sword techniques, you still need to practice hard in the future to increase their power. When you've mastered those 2 moves to the greater mastery realm, I'll teach you the other moves. Ji Tianxing hurriedly cupped his hands and bowed. He said sincerely, "Thank you, senior, for teaching me the sword techniques. I can't thank you enough." Xiang Wuji smiled at him and said in a mocking tone, "Hee, then how are you going to thank me? How about this? You leave the storm courtyard tomorrow and stay in my great peace palace. Every day, you will clean my courtyard and take care of the herbs." Before he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing's expression changed. He pointed at the sky above his head and hurriedly said to Xiang Wuji, "Senior, it's already dark. I still have matters to attend to, so I will leave first. Please rest early." After he finished speaking, he didn't care if Xiang Wuji agreed or not and ran away like a wisp of smoke. Xiang Wuji looked at his back and scolded in a joking manner, "You heartless little bastard. How many people can't get this job even in their dreams? You actually disdain it. If it wasn't for the fact that the sword energy you cultivate is similar to the Kenshin art, or even very likely, I wouldn't bother with you and waste my time with you." Chapter 115. When Ji Tianxing left the Grand Peace Palace, it was already 9 in the morning. Other than the few lights in the Grand Peace Palace, the entire mountain was shrouded in the darkness of night. It was quiet and eerie. Even though this was the last time he had returned, he had spent almost 2 hours practicing the flying star sword technique. But his heart was filled with excitement and anticipation. His footsteps were much lighter. 15 minutes later, he was walking on a small tree-lined path at the foot of the mountain. There was not a single person on the path. The surrounding forest was also as dark as ink. It was deathly silent. Suddenly, 2 cold lights lit up in the forest. They shot at Ji Tianxing's head and chest like lightning. Xiao xiao? Those 2 cold lights were hidden weapons and throwing knives. They pierced through the night sky with a sharp sound. Ji Tianxing was pondering over the 2 sword techniques he had just learned. He was suddenly awakened by the sound and his expression changed. Damn it! Someone is ambushing me! He immediately exploded with a vast amount of true essence. He moved 3 meters to the side to avoid the attack of the 2 hidden weapons. The 2 hidden weapons and throwing knives flew in front of him. With 2 dong, dong sounds, they nailed themselves into a large tree on the side of the road. The finger-long blade was completely embedded into the tree trunk. The handle was still violently vibrating. Clearly, these 2 hidden weapons and throwing knives contained a large amount of power. If they hit Ji Tianxing, they would definitely pierce 2 bloody holes. Ji Tianxing retreated to the forest on the side of the road. He hid behind a large tree that was as thick as a water bucket. Suddenly being ambushed, he was angry and puzzled. But he was still calm and did not lose his composure. He hid behind the large tree. His sharp eyes observed the forest in front of him, looking for the person who had attacked him. In the next moment, a black shadow charged out of the forest in front of him. That person was holding a treasure sword that emitted a cold light. He was charging straight at him. When he saw that black shadow, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned. His eyes flashed with cold, killing intent. It's him! That night, he was the one who lured me out of the room and then framed me. Ji Tianxing instantly recognized him. This black-clothed warrior with a veil over his face was the black-clothed man from that night. Just in time. I want to see who's after me. He shouted in his heart as he secretly mobilized the true essence in his body, and a strong fighting intent burst out from his body. At the same time, the man in black rushed to the front of Ji Tianxing, less than 3 meters away. The black-clothed man leaped, jumping more than 3 meters high, waving his sword and thrusting out a dozen dazzling dark yellow sword auras, enveloping Ji Tianxing. Swish, swish, swish. Suddenly, the night sky around Ji Tianxing was illuminated by the sword light. Many branches and leaves were torn to shreds by the sharp sword qi. At the critical moment, he did not hesitate to use the flying star sword technique that he had just learned. Thousand Feather Blade. Ji Tianxing bellowed with a murderous aura. He suddenly shot out 3 chopstick-length dark golden sword qi towards the black-robed man. Ding 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 ding. The golden sword qi was as fast as lightning, and it clashed with the dozen or so sword projections, resulting in a series of crisp sword cries. In just a short time, the 3 golden sword qi had struck hundreds of times. It was so fast that people could not see the trajectory and route of the sword qi. The black-robed man's more than a dozen dark yellow sword projections were shattered by the sword qi on the spot, turning into little yellow light spots and dissipating. However, the power of the Thousand Feather Blade was not limited to this. The 3 golden sword qi were still attacking at a very fast speed. Swish, swish, swish. In the blink of an eye, the 3 sword qi had attacked hundreds of times. The black-robed man was obviously stunned for a moment, and he hurriedly waved his sword to resist. Ding ding dang dang. After a series of collision sounds, the black-robed man's chest and abdomen were stabbed dozens of times by the sword qi. His body trembled again, and he let out a painful muffled groan. He fell from the air to the grass and rolled a few times before he got up. The black clothes on his chest and abdomen had been shredded to pieces by the sword qi, revealing the golden soft armor he wore underneath. Fortunately, he had the protection of the golden soft armor. Otherwise, he would have been pierced into a sieve by the sword qi. The black-robed man angrily shouted in a low voice, and unwillingly waved his sword to attack again. However, Ji Tianxing controlled the 3 sword qi, and stabbed hundreds of times in a breath. A large number of golden sword shadows surrounded the black-robed man. Moreover, he controlled the sword qi to stab the black-robed man's arms, face, and legs, which were not protected by the soft armor. The black-robed man waved his sword to resist, and could only block the sword qi that was attacking his head. After another series of ding ding dang dang sounds, the black-robed man's arms and legs were pierced with more than a dozen bloody holes by the sword qi. He half knelt on the ground, holding his sword with both hands, and panted violently. Red blood flowed out from the more than a dozen wounds, sprinkling on the lush grass. At the same time, Ji Tianxing's Thousand Feather Blade also ended, and the 3 golden sword qi flew back to his side and floated. "Who are you? Why do you want to assassinate me?" he asked in a cold voice, and stepped closer to the black-robed man, exuding a strong murderous aura. The black-robed man did not say a word, and without hesitation, turned around and fled. His speed was as fast as an arrow, and in the blink of an eye, he entered the forest. "Don't even think about escaping." Ji Tianxing quickly chased after him, and also entered the forest. However, the night was dark, and it was difficult to tell the direction in the forest. The black-robed man had the strength of a profound understanding cultivator, and he had cultivated a high level of qigong. He was also very familiar with the terrain, and his speed in the forest was extremely fast. Ji Tianxing had only chased for 1,000 meters before he was shaken off by the black-robed man. Damn it! I let him escape again. In desperation, Ji Tianxing could only give up the chase, and unwillingly return to the tree-lined path. He returned to the place where he had been attacked, and took down the 2 concealed throwing knives that were nailed to the tree, and searched the nearby area. Unfortunately, other than the 2 concealed throwing knives, the black-robed man did not leave behind any clues. Ji Tianxing could only put away the 2 concealed throwing knives, and with a gloomy face, rushed back to the wind cloud courtyard. After returning to his residence, he did not even have the mood to eat dinner, and sat under the lamp, carefully examining the two throwing knives. However, the two throwing knives were only common concealed weapons, and did not have any identification, nor was there anything special about them. With just these two concealed throwing knives, Ji Tianxing could not find out the black-robed man's identity. He put away the throwing knives, and with a serious expression, he frowned and pondered. That black-robed man had the strength of a profound understanding cultivator, and he was very familiar with the sect's terrain, so he should be an inner disciple of the sect. He ambushed me midway, so he obviously knew my whereabouts. But other than Ji Ling and Lu Mingyang, who else wants to kill me? Luckily I had just learned the Flying Star Sword art, or else I would not have been able to block the black-robed man's attack, and I would have most likely been assassinated by him tonight. But even if I had learned the Flying Star Sword art, and could fight with a profound understanding cultivator, I did not cultivate a high-level Qinggong, so I would not be able to catch up to that black-robed man. It looks like I need to quickly find a high-level Qinggong to cultivate. The next time that black-robed man tries to assassinate me, I will be able to catch up to him and find out his identity. Chapter 116. In the next few days, the black-clothed man didn't appear again. He was probably recuperating in secret. Ji Tianxing would sweep the floor of the Grand Peace Palace every day. He would also study the 1,000 recipe set and learn about pill formulas and medicine. At night, he would focus on cultivating the Flying Star Sword art and pondering the mysteries of the 1,000 Feather Blade and Wind Lightning Strike. In these few days, Xiang Wuji didn't appear again. Ji Tianxing also didn't know what he was busy with. Ever since that evening when she met Lu Mingyang outside the gate, Xianxian hadn't gone to the Grand Peace Palace. Unknowingly, 5 days had passed. Today was the second week of the Tempest Courtyard's small exam. Han Qiusheng wanted to test everyone's learning results. Early in the morning, the bell rang in the Tempest Courtyard's main hall. Ji Tianxing, Nye Hao, and the others all rushed to the main hall to accept Han Qiusheng's test. The content of this test was related to pill formulas and medicine. Han Qiusheng gave each of the 10 disciples a pill formula and had Du Wu place more than 40 sets of medicinal ingredients on the table. The pill formulas in everyone's hands had all been cut down. They were all missing 2 or 3 medicinal ingredients. Han Qiusheng's test was to have everyone carefully study the pill formulas in half an incense stick's time and make up for the missing medicinal ingredients. In the end, the 10 disciples all completed the task in half an incense stick's time and made up for the missing medicinal ingredients. After Han Qiusheng checked, he announced the results of the test. Ji Tianxing, Nye Hao, Ji Ling, Yimo, Shi Jingqing, and the others all completed the task without error. Only one disciple made a mistake and failed to complete the task. This disciple was reprimanded by Han Qiusheng and had a true elemental pill deducted from his monthly allowance. Every disciple of the Sky-bearing sect received a certain amount of monthly allowance. This was a subsidy given by the sect to help the disciples increase their strength. Ordinary outer sect disciples only received 6 true elemental pills and 5 spirit fruits to increase their strength every month. As for the 10 genius disciples of the Tempest Courtyard, they received 10 true elemental pills and 8 spirit fruits every month. Ji Tianxing, Nye Hao, and the others had only been in the sect for half a month. They had to wait until the beginning of the next month to receive their monthly allowance. The disciple who did not complete the mission had his true elemental Dan deducted just like that, which was also very distressing. After the assessment ended, Han Qiusheng announced everyone's mission for the next half a month. Now that you've recognized the medicinal herbs, you've also understood the pill formula and the prescription. In the next half a month, everyone will study the pill formulas of the Spirit Nourishing Pill, Green Jade Pill, and Heart Nourishing Pill, and practice refining pills. There is a pill room in the outer sect that is specially provided for disciples to refine pills. Everyone can go there to practice refining pills. However, each of you will only have 3 sets of materials to refine pills, so you must understand them thoroughly and try to refine pills only when you are confident. At the end of this month, I will conduct a monthly test for all of you. At that time, you will be rewarded according to your performance. I can reveal one thing in advance. The top 3 in the monthly assessment will be rewarded, but the reward for the first place is the most generous. It will greatly affect your cultivation for the next 6 months. After speaking, Han Qiusheng had Du Wu distribute 3 sets of alchemy materials to each person. After that, Han Qiusheng left with Du Wu. All the disciples carried their bundles of medicinal herbs and walked out of the main hall one after another. Ji Tianxing and Ye Hao exchanged a few words, and the 2 of them were the last to walk out of the main hall. When they walked into the courtyard, they saw several other disciples gathered at the entrance of the Tempest courtyard. They seemed to be discussing something in low voices. He frowned and subconsciously muttered, "What are they doing?" Nie Hao glanced at the entrance and nodded. "Let's go take a look." The 2 of them stepped across the courtyard and walked towards the entrance. They saw a woman wearing a long white dress standing at the entrance. Although everyone could only see the woman's silhouette, they all revealed a stunned expression and their eyes revealed adoration. The woman in the white dress was like snow, and her graceful figure made people's hearts beat faster. Her beautiful cheeks were suffocating, and her long black hair hung down to her waist. She only stood quietly outside the entrance, but she had a kind of aloof and noble temperament that was aloof from the world. When the genius disciples of the Tempest courtyard saw her, they felt ashamed of their inferiority and did not dare to approach and disturb her. Several disciples gathered together and discussed in low voices with excited expressions on their faces. "What a beautiful woman! I'm not afraid of being laughed at, but this is the first time I've seen such a peerless beauty in my life. Yes, I feel the same way. Such a peerless beauty with an otherworldly temperament, just like a fairy from the heavens. Hee, you are too ignorant. This beauty in white is our senior sister, the chief disciple of our courtyard, Yun Yao." "Ah? She is Yun Yao? The number 1 genius of the Tianshan region? Oh my God, I've heard of her reputation and deeds 2 years ago. I didn't expect to see her in person today. I'm so lucky. It's a pity that such a peerless beauty can only be seen from afar and cannot be profaned. Otherwise, I would have the courage to visit senior sister." Shi Jingqing and Yimo also gathered together. They looked at Yun Yao up and down with passionate eyes, whispering to each other. "I didn't expect senior sister Yun Yao to come to the outer courtyard and to our Tempest courtyard. Yes. I don't know why senior sister came to the Tempest courtyard. It seems like she's here to look for someone? I don't know who is so lucky to be acquainted with senior sister and make her come to the Tempest courtyard to look for him. How good would it be if the person senior sister is looking for is me? Tomorrow, I will be famous in the courtyard. I don't know how many senior and junior brothers will be jealous of me." Just as everyone was talking, Yun Yao, who was standing at the entrance, suddenly turned her head and looked into the courtyard. Her cold expression immediately became gentle and she called out in a very pleasant voice, "Junior brother Tianxing, come out for a moment." Upon hearing this, all the disciples in the courtyard were dumbfounded. Everyone was shocked and looked at Ji Tianxing in disbelief. Their eyes were full of jealousy and envy. Ji Tianxing and Ye Hao walked side by side and approached the entrance. Seeing Yun Yao standing at the entrance, he guessed that the disciples must be talking about her. But he didn't expect that Yun Yao would come to look for him and even take the initiative to greet him. He was stunned for a moment before he walked to the entrance and stood in front of Yun Yao. "Miss Yun Yao?" He nodded to Yun Yao and was about to ask. Yun Yao frowned and stared at him with a playful look. Ji Tianxing came to his senses and quickly changed his words. "Senior sister, are you looking for me?" "Yes," Yun Yao said calmly, "I have something to say to you. Do you have time?" "Of course." Ji Tianxing nodded and agreed without hesitation. Yun Yao nodded and turned to walk out. "Come with me." When the disciples in the courtyard saw Ji Tianxing leave with Yun Yao, they immediately showed expressions of envy and jealousy and whispered to each other again. A new month has arrived. Little he is here to ask for a few recommendation tickets. He asks his brothers to add this book to their bookshelves so that they can see the latest content every day. Chapter 117. Ji Tianxing followed Yun Yao out of the storm courtyard. They were walking on a tree-lined path halfway up the mountain. This path was located deep in the forest. It was quiet and uninhabited, and very few people would pass by it. The two of them walked along the tree-lined path for 3 miles before standing under a 100-year-old tree and chatting. Yun Yao calmly looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, "You've been in the sect for half a month now. Have you adapted?" Ji Tianxing smiled lightly and nodded. "Thank you for your concern, eldest senior sister. I've already adapted to the rules of the sect and gotten used to life in the sect." Yun Yao nodded and continued, "I've heard junior sister Xianxian mention you before. She said you violated the sect's rules and were punished to sweep the floor of the Grand Peace Palace." Ji Tianxing was a little embarrassed and smiled embarrassedly. "Yes, Deacon Han punished me to sweep the floor for a month. Fortunately, half a month has passed." Yun Yao frowned slightly and said in a serious tone, "The Grand Peace Palace is a place that ordinary people can't enter. Other than junior sister who can enter and leave freely, even I have to get the old man's permission to enter. Junior brother Tianxing, you must be careful when you're in the Grand Peace Palace. You must not anger that old man. Otherwise, even if I want to help you, it will be difficult." That old man's identity. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Senior sister, I seem to have offended that old man, and it wasn't a light offense." Yun Yao frowned and a trace of worry flashed through her eyes. "What did you do this time?" Ji Tianxing didn't dare to look directly into her big clear eyes. He turned his head to look elsewhere and said with a bitter smile, "I accidentally tore off his roof and destroyed the blue soul grass and azure spirit tree that he carefully cultivated. You?" Yun Yao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She looked at Ji Tianxing with a complicated expression. After a long time, she shook her head and sighed, "AI, good luck to you. In the entire Sky Pillar sect, only that old man has the jade soul grass and the azure spirit tree. In the past, when I wanted to ask for a jade soul grass, I had to beg Master to come forward and ask for it. It's not easy for you to stand in front of me alive." Ji Tianxing listened to Yun Yao's helpless tone and looked at her worried face. His heart skipped a beat. "Eldest senior sister, don't worry about me. I know what I'm doing. Besides, that old man doesn't seem to be as cruel as you said." Yun Yao's beautiful eyes turned, glanced at him, and said in a strange tone, "I'm not worried about you. I just think that it would be so pitiful if you were beaten to death by that old man at such a young age." Ji Tianxing was speechless. He didn't know how to respond to her. Moreover, he had always felt that Yun Yao was a high and mighty holy fairy who was untainted by the mortal world. She was usually cold and proud. He didn't know why, but Yun Yao didn't have that kind of cold and distant aura in front of him. He thought to himself, "Is there anything special about me? How can I get Yun Yao's pleasant treatment and care?" Just as he was letting his imagination run wild, a young man in white appeared on the tree-lined path and ran over quickly. The young man in white seemed to be looking for something. When he suddenly saw Yun Yao's figure, he immediately sped up and ran over. "Eldest senior sister, I've finally found you." Bai Wuchen looked like he was in a hurry as he quickly came to Yun Yao's side. When he saw Ji Tianxing, he immediately frowned. Bai Wuchen glanced coldly at Ji Tianxing. He seemed a little unhappy. Yun Yao's expression was indifferent. She asked calmly, "Junior brother Bai, are you looking for me?" Bai Wuchen retracted his gaze from Ji Tianxing and quickly smiled at Yun Yao. "Eldest senior sister, the sect master is back. He's in the Sky Raising Palace. He sent you a message asking you to meet him." Yun Yao's expression softened. "Master is back? Okay, I'll go to the Sky Raising Palace now." Then, she turned to look at Ji Tianxing and reminded him, "Junior brother Tianxing, you must remember what I said just now." "Of course, I won't dare to forget." Ji Tianxing cupped his fists and smiled. Yun Yao nodded. Then, she turned and left with Bai Wuchen. Before leaving, Bai Wuchen turned to look at Ji Tianxing. His gaze was a little cold. Ji Tianxing's expression remained calm. No one could see any change in his expression. However, he could clearly see Bai Wuchen's expression and gaze. He already had a plan in mind. This Bai Wuchen. Since the first time I met him in Qingyun Kingdom, he seemed to have some prejudice against me. I wonder how I offended him? After standing under the tree for a while, he turned and left. After a quarter of an hour, Ji Tianxing returned to the storm courtyard. The few disciples had not returned to their rooms. They were still in the courtyard. They gathered in twos and threes and were still discussing something in low voices. Seeing Ji Tianxing return, the few disciples quieted down at the same time. They all looked at him with complicated expressions. Everyone tacitly kept quiet and watched him as he walked through the courtyard. It was not until he returned to his room that they continued to discuss. Their expressions became more and more interesting. I don't know what kind of luck that kid has. He actually got to know eldest senior sister. How despicable. Eldest senior sister is like a goddess. How could she be friends with him? Shi Jingqing and Yamo were so jealous that their eyes were almost red. Their hatred for Ji Tianxing deepened. The other two disciples gathered under the tree. Their faces were also filled with jealousy and indignation. No. We have to tell eldest senior sister about that kid stealing the spirit fruit. We can't let that despicable Ji Tianxing get close to eldest senior sister. Cough cough. Do you know eldest senior sister? Can you see her? Can you talk to her? The person who spoke earlier did not utter a word and retreated with an awkward expression. Ji Ling sat on the stone bench under the big banyan tree. He held an ancient book in his hand and pretended to be reading. Hearing the disciples' indignant discussion, he also sneered and interjected. He, back in Qingyun Kingdom, if it wasn't for eldest senior sister's help, that kid wouldn't even have the qualifications to participate in the entrance competition. When the other disciples heard that there was gossip, they hurried to Ji Ling's side and looked at him eagerly. Ji Ling, were you talking about Ji Tianxing? What's going on exactly? You should know about it, right? Hurry up and tell us. Don't keep us in suspense. Ji Ling seemed to like the feeling of being surrounded by everyone, like the moon surrounded by stars. The sneer on his face deepened. He glanced at Ji Tianxing's room. Then he lowered his voice and started to tell them about the entrance competition. The disciples gathered in a circle. They all listened attentively and discussed from time to time. Unknowingly, Ji Ling and the other disciples stood on the same side. They all hated Ji Tianxing. Chapter 118. Inside the Sky Pillar sect, there was a mountain called Qishao. This mountain was located in the center of the 9 peaks of the Sky Pillar sect and was also the core of the sect protecting array. At the top of Qishao Peak was a magnificent palace called the Sky Pillar Palace. At this moment, the Sky Pillar Palace was empty except for a middle-aged man in a golden robe who was sitting on the sect master's throne. This person was tall and sturdy, handsome, and naturally exuded a powerful and noble aura. Although he looked to be in his 40s, his hair was already white, and his eyes contained an aura of vicissitudes that didn't match his face. This kind of aura could only be possessed by someone who had been tempered by the vicissitudes of time. He was the current sect master of the Sky Pillar sect, a peerless powerhouse who shook the Tianxin region, Chu Tianxing. Chu Tianxing was frowning and pondering, and there was a hint of worry between his brows. At this moment, Yun Yao, who was dressed in a white dress, stepped through the door and quickly came to the main hall. She looked up at the middle-aged man on the sect master's throne and bowed respectfully. Disciple greets sect master. Only then did Chu Tianxing collect his thoughts and look at Yun Yao. He said in a low and kind voice, Yun Yao, come here. Master has something to tell you. Yun Yao quickly stepped forward and walked to the steps of the throne, standing 3 meters away from Chu Tianxing. Master, you just came back and summoned disciple here. Is it because of that matter? Chu Tianxing nodded slightly and said with a worried expression, yes, it's because of that matter. After a pause, he said in a low voice, Yun Yao, you are the disciple with the most potential under Master. You are also the chief disciple of the Sky Pillar sect and have been internally decided to be the next sect master. After Master abdicates in the future, you will still be in charge of the Sky Pillar sect. Therefore, Master has to tell you something so that you can be prepared. Hearing Chu Tianxing's words, Yun Yao frowned and had a bad premonition in her heart. Master, you are at the peak of your strength, and it won't be a problem for you to be in charge of the Sky Pillar sect for another 100 years. Why are you suddenly saying such heavy words today? Could it be that matter has already affected the safety of the Sky Pillar sect? Chu Tianxing nodded and said with a serious expression, that's right. Yun Yao, you are really smart. Didn't you always want to ask about that matter? Today, I will tell you the truth. Listen carefully. Yun Yao understood the importance of the matter, so she no longer interjected. She listened with a solemn expression. Chu Tianxing said with a heavy tone. 1,000 years ago, a peerless demon appeared in the Tianxin region. He wreaked havoc everywhere and brought disaster to the people. That demon willfully slaughtered the innocent and destroyed countless cities, resulting in the deaths of nearly 10 million civilians. He has committed a monstrous sin of slaughter. That devil even killed his way into the ancient realm of stars and destroyed a few large sections. He slaughtered thousands of people and plundered countless treasures. Coincidentally, an otherworldly expert appeared and defeated the demon with a single sword strike, suppressing him beneath the Red Cloud Peak. At that time, our sect's founder witnessed it with his own eyes and was fortunate enough to receive guidance from that master. So, our sect's founder moved 8 mountains and placed them around the Scarlet Firmament Peak to form a sealing array. Later, our sect's founder established the Sky Pillar sect. As our sect grew stronger and stronger, we suppressed the Sky Pillar sect for generations. The deeds and legends of the Sky Pillar sect gradually disappeared. Hearing this, Yun Yao's big clear eyes were filled with shock. It was the first time she had heard of this legend. Only then did she know that the 9 mountains of the Sky Pillar sect formed not only a protective array but also a sealing array to seal the Sky Pillar sect. At this time, Chu Tianxing continued. 2 years ago, Master noticed that the sect's protective array was somewhat abnormal and found that the sealing array had been damaged. The Sky Pillar sect's founder has been sealed for thousands of years and is about to awaken. A month ago, Master brought 8 elders to the foot of the Scarlet Firmament Peak and strengthened the seal. However, the Sky Pillar sect's founder has awakened and will break the seal sooner or later. Back then, the Sky Pillar sect's founder caused a bloody storm in the Tianxin region and slaughtered millions of people. All the sects were helpless and were almost destroyed by him. If it weren't for that master, the Tianxin region would have been covered in blood and all the sects would have been destroyed. Now, if the Sky Pillar sect's founder breaks the seal, he will definitely take revenge on our sect and the Tianxin region. At that time, I'm afraid that no one will be able to resist the Sky Pillar sect's founder. The Tianxin region will also be plunged into misery and suffering. Yun Yao listened carefully. Her eyes were filled with shock and worry. She frowned and asked, Sectmaster, there are 8 sects in the Star Ancient Realm now. There are countless experts and tens of thousands of elite martial artists. Can't they deal with the Sky Pillar sect's founder? Chu Tianxing shook his head gently and smiled bitterly. Yun Yao, you haven't succeeded as the sect master, so you don't know the secrets from 1,000 years ago. You also don't know how terrifying the Sky Pillar sect's founder is. Which of the sects that were destroyed by the Sky Pillar sect 1,000 years ago wasn't stronger than our Sky Pillar sect? In the end, no one was able to stop the Sky Pillar sect's founder. Those sects were also destroyed. Yun Yao frowned and asked again, but Master, the Sky Pillar sect's founder has been sealed for 1,000 years. His strength must have decreased greatly. He's not as strong as he was at his peak. Chu Tianxing pondered for a moment with a solemn expression before he explained, Yun Yao, when you were young, I told you about the demon race. The demon race is a very mysterious and terrifying race. They are the most brutal and bloodthirsty race in the world. This race is different from us humans. They are born with stronger bodies and more outstanding cultivation talent than humans. Moreover, the cultivation methods they practice are very bloody and evil. The speed at which they increase their strength is several times faster than humans. The Sky Pillar sect's founder sealed under the Scarlet Firmament Peak can quickly increase his strength through bloody slaughter. My race absolutely can't understand that kind of strange and evil cultivation method. Yun Yao nodded with a solemn expression, Disciple understands. However, Master, don't you have any other way? Chu Tianxing shook his head and said with a wry smile, Apart from strengthening the seal, Master can only look for the Sky Pillar sect's founder. I hope that person can help our sect reopen the seal and seal the Sky Pillar sect's founder for another 1,000 years. Speaking up to here, Chu Tianxing asked Yun Yao, by the way, have you found the person Master asked you to look for? Yun Yao nodded and replied calmly, we found him. He's now in the outer sect's Tempest courtyard. Chu Tianxing's spirit shook and a gratified look appeared on his face. Good. After Master has dealt with the sect's affairs, bring him to see me. Whether or not we can reopen the seal and seal the Sky Pillar sect's founder again in exchange for 1,000 years of peace and stability will depend on that Sky Pillar sect's founder. Chapter 119. The night was dark and there was no moon in the sky. Ji Tianxing had been busy in the Grand Peace Palace all day. When he returned to his residence in the Storm Courtyard, his stomach was rumbling with hunger. After eating dinner, he sat at the table and drank tea as he pondered over his next task. Although Deacon Han punished me to sweep the Grand Peace Palace for a month, I have already cleaned the Grand Peace Palace in this half a month. The smelly old man hasn't shown up these past few days. I won't be going to the Grand Peace Palace to work tomorrow. I have to go to the alchemy room to try refining pills. The end of the month examination is very important. If I can take first place, I will receive a very generous reward. I have to work harder. After making up his mind, Ji Tianxing drank the tea in his cup and prepared to enter the secret room to cultivate. But at this moment, a furry figure appeared from the window and a small ice blue head poked out. The small head opened a pair of silver eyes and looked around the room. Seeing that there was only Ji Tianxing in the room, it stretched out its small claws and opened the window. With a soot sound, it flew into the room. Ji Tianxing heard the movement and subconsciously turned around. He saw the small ice blue beast flapping its wings. It was Qian Yu. He immediately frowned and asked in a low voice, Qian, why did you run back? Qian Yu quickly flew in front of him and anxiously whispered, Old Ji, the situation is not good. Let's quickly run for our lives. HM? Ji Tianxing looked at it with a puzzled expression and unhappily asked, what are you talking about? Why do we need to run for our lives? Qian Yu said anxiously, Old Ji, I took the risk of being roasted and eaten to sneak out of the Grand Peace Palace just to inform you of my whereabouts. You have to believe me. The Sky-bearing sect is about to face a great disaster. Let's quickly run. Ji Tianxing knew that Qian Yu had always been cunning and treacherous. How could he easily believe its words? Grabbing Qian Yu, Yang Kai brought it into the secret chamber, then smiled and said, All right, take your time and tell me what's going on. Speak clearly. Qian Yu hurriedly explained, previously, when I was in the Great Peace Palace, I accidentally heard the smelly old man and a few elders discussing a secret matter. I heard them say that the Sky Pillar sect is facing a huge crisis. Soon, a disaster will descend. At that time, even the sect won't be able to protect itself, and blood will flow like rivers. The Sky Pillar sect is facing a huge crisis? Disaster is coming? Ji Tianxing's brows knitted together, and his expression was somewhat solemn. Qian, did you hear it from them? Qian Yu nodded solemnly. Ji Tianxing pondered for a moment and asked, Then did you hear what kind of crisis and disaster it is? Why couldn't they protect the sect? The Sky Pillar sect is the #1 sect in the heavenly stellar region. Qian Yu shook his head and said regretfully, the smelly old man placed a restriction on the 100 treasures brocade pouch. I could only vaguely hear a few words. I don't know what happened. Speaking of this, he anxiously urged, Old Ji, don't ask so much. Who cares about the disaster and crisis? Let's quickly leave the Sky Pillar sect. Saving our lives is more important. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and shook his head. With a firm expression, he said, No, I can't leave yet. I must find the heavenly star bead. Old Ji. Qian Yu looked at him very seriously and said in a solemn tone, It's already a matter of life and death. Why are you still thinking about the heavenly star bead? Ji Tianxing also looked at him with a solemn expression and said, Qian, that thing is very important to me. I must find it. Moreover, even if the Sky Pillar sect really encounters some kind of crisis, there are so many experts in the sect. They will definitely deal with it. You only heard a few words and don't know what kind of crisis it is. When it will happen, how can we blindly run away? Qian Yu saw that Ji Tianxing's attitude was firm and that he had made up his mind not to leave. He could only helplessly sigh. Old Ji, I'll give you a heads up. Since you've decided not to leave, there's nothing I can do. In any case, when the Sky Pillar sect really is destroyed, I'll definitely run away. Ji Tianxing knocked his little head and said with a smile, then we'll talk about it when it happens. What are you in such a hurry for now? That's right, you and the little black dragon stayed in the Graydon Palace for half a month. The stinky old man didn't mistreat you, right? Qian Yu curled his lips and said in a mocking tone, do you think we're like you? We were beaten and abused by the stinky old man. I'm such a smart and cute little fellow. Anyone with a bit of compassion wouldn't have the heart to bully me. Ji Tianxing looked askance at him and said in a bad mood, when you say that, doesn't your conscience hurt? Qian Yu was speechless and could only roll his eyes at him. After a moment of silence, he continued, but to be honest, the stinky old man looks very hateful on the surface, but he's actually quite good to me and the little black dragon. During our time in the Graydon Palace, the stinky old man often took out many spirit fruits for us to eat to help us recover our strength. If I hadn't eaten so many spirit fruits and recovered a bit of my strength, I wouldn't have been able to hear the conversation between the stinky old man and the elders. As Ji Tianxing listened, his brows furrowed tightly. The stinky old man took the initiative to take out spirit fruits for you to eat? That's right. Qian Yu subconsciously nodded. Ji Tianxing's expression changed and he angrily cursed, "Humph! Damn stinky old man." He was clearly the one who took the initiative to give you spirit fruits. Back then, he even said that you stole his spirit fruits and caused me to willingly be punished by him. Too hateful. Qian Yu immediately covered his little mouth with his claws and giggled. His eyes were filled with schadenfreude. Ji Tianxing chatted with him for a while before urging him to quickly leave. Qian, hurry back to the Graydon Palace. Don't let the stinky old man find out that you snuck out. Qian Yu waved his little claws at him before flying out of the secret room. Under the cover of the night, he quietly left the Tempest courtyard. 15 minutes later, Ji Tianxing calmed down and began to cultivate in the secret room. The vitality replenishing pill that he had taken before still had some faint effects, allowing his strength to increase at a faster rate than usual. After a night, Ji Tianxing felt that he wasn't far from the 7th level of the true element realm. Perhaps he would be able to advance next month. The next morning, he finished cultivating and walked out of the secret room. After washing up, he took out a set of ingredients for refining pills and prepared to go to the pill room to try refining pills. However, when he walked to the Tempest courtyard, he met Ji Ku at the entrance. Ji Ku had specially come to find him and had been waiting outside for a long time. Ever since Ji Tianxing entered the Sky-bearing sect, he hadn't seen Ji Ku for more than half a month. Seeing that Ji Ku had come to find him, he brought Ji Ku into the Tempest courtyard and returned to his residence. Chapter 120. Ji Tianxing chatted with Ji Ku while pouring tea for her. Ji Ku curiously looked around the room, looking here and there. Wow, big brother Tianxing, the treatment of your Tempest courtyard's disciples is really good. Not only are the rooms very spacious, but there are also secret rooms for cultivation. It's not like our White Dew courtyard where everyone only has a small room. Ji Ku looked around before sitting down at the table and looking at Ji Tianxing with envy. Ji Tianxing only smiled and asked in a gentle tone, "Cuckoo, why did you come looking for me so early in the morning? Is something the matter?" Ji Ku glanced at him reproachfully and pretended to be annoyed. "Humph. Big brother Tianxing, I haven't seen you in half a month. Can't I come to see you?" Of course you can." Ji Tianxing smiled and intimately patted her head. "Cuckoo, how have you been in the past half a month? Have you gotten used to it?" Ji Ku curled her lips and gloomily said, "Of course the White Dew courtyard's conditions can't compare to the palace. But coming to the Sky Pillar sect to cultivate is to suffer hardships. Otherwise, how can I increase my strength?" "And it's good that you can think like that." Ji Tianxing nodded and asked, "Then what have you been studying in the past half a month? Have you also been studying alchemy?" Ji Ku's eyes widened in confusion and asked, "What are we studying alchemy for? It's not like we can increase our strength." "Ever since we entered the White Dew courtyard, We've been practicing sword arts from dawn until noon every day. We also have to meditate in the afternoon and evening. Lord Deacon said that we should focus on cultivating martial arts. We can't be distracted by other things. Ji Tianxing stared at Ji Ku in a daze. His brows slightly furrowed as a trace of doubt flashed through his heart. It seems that the contents of the 3 outer courtyards' teachings are different. The disciples of the White Dew Courtyard cultivate diligently, but our Tempest Courtyard wants to learn alchemy. I don't know what the deacons are thinking, but there should be some deeper meaning, right? At this moment, Ji Ku looked at him with concern and asked with a smile, Brother Tianxing, how have you been for the past 2 weeks? Did it go well? Successful? Ji Tianxing hesitated for a moment before squeezing out a smile. He nodded and said, yes, not bad. Big Brother Tianxing, you're lying. I can tell. Ji Ku saw that his expression was strange, so she pouted and looked unhappy. Big Brother Tianxing, are you in trouble? If you still treat me as a friend, then tell me. Ji Tianxing knew that Ji Ku was extremely intelligent. His reaction just now could not be hidden from Ji Ku. Thus, he could only tell Ji Ku the truth. All right. Actually, things have been going well for me for the past 2 weeks. It's just that someone is secretly plotting against me. They've already ambushed me twice. Unfortunately, I've tried every means to investigate, but I haven't been able to find any clues. I don't know who is secretly plotting against me. There's actually such a thing? Ji Ku's eyes widened, her pretty face filled with worry. Despicable bastard. He's actually so daring to ambush Big Brother Tianxing in the Sky Pillar sect. Ji Ku looked indignant, as if she was the one who was ambushed. After frowning and thinking for a moment, she lowered her voice and asked, Big Brother Tianxing, do you have any suspicions about who it is? Could it be my imperial uncle? Or that despicable Lu Mingyang? She knew that Lu Mingyang had entered the Sky Pillar sect and directly skipped the outer court to become an inner court disciple. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with a solemn expression, I've investigated and analyzed it. That person is neither your imperial uncle nor Lu Mingyang. Then who else could it be? Ji Ku frowned and pondered with a puzzled expression. After a moment, she suddenly thought of something and a glint flashed across her eyes. All right, Big Brother Tianxing, I suddenly thought of someone. I think it's very likely to be him. Ling Yunfei's cousin, Jian Yu. Ji Tianxing frowned and looked confused. Ling Yunfei's cousin? How could it be her cousin? Jian Yu? I've never heard of this person. Ji Ku quickly explained, Big Brother Tianxing, it's like this. Ling Yunfei does have a cousin called Jian Yu. 3 years ago, Jian Yu passed the Sky Pillar sect's entrance examination and left the Royal Azure Kingdom to become a disciple of the Sky Pillar sect. Since then, Jian Yu has never returned to the Royal Azure Kingdom. However, it's said that Jian Yu has always liked his cousin Ling Yunfei. Ji Tianxing finally understood and nodded. No wonder I've never heard Ling Yunfei mention Jian Yu. It turns out that he entered the Sky Pillar sect 3 years ago. 3 years have passed. As long as his aptitude isn't bad, he should have entered the inner sect by now and gained a foothold in the Sky Pillar sect to familiarize himself with the situation. In that case, the black-clothed man who ambushed me could really be him. Ji Ku also nodded and said, Big Brother Tianxing, you've just entered the sect. There are only a few people who have a grudge with you. After excluding my imperial uncle and Lu Mingyang, only Jian Yu is the most suspicious. Big Brother Tianxing, you must be careful in the future. Listening to her worried tone, Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. After the two chatted for a while, Ji Ku bid farewell and left. After Ji Ku left the Fengyun courtyard, Ji Tianxing restrained his complicated thoughts and carried the alchemy ingredients to the pill room. Ji Ling had just walked out of the Fengyun courtyard with a bag of alchemy ingredients in his hand and was about to go to the pill room to try alchemy. However, just as he walked to the entrance, he saw a burly young man standing outside the door. Ji Ling's eyes flashed with a strange light. He quickly greeted him with a smile and respectfully said, Senior brother Hao, why have you come to the Fengyun courtyard? The burly young disciple was Hao Meng. He glanced at Ji Ling and revealed a hearty smile. He nodded and said, Ji Ling, I came here specifically to find you. Ji Ling quickly asked, "Senior brother Hao, what are your orders?" Hao Meng patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't ask first. Come with me to see senior sister. She sent me to find you." "Senior sister?" Ji Ling was startled. Yun Yao's fairy-like face and figure appeared in his mind. Seeing Hao Meng turn around and leave, he didn't dare to think too much and quickly followed. An hour later, Hao Meng left the towering sky peak with Ji Ling and arrived at the most sacred and solemn Crimson Firmament Peak in the towering sky sect. Hao Meng brought Ji Ling to the top of the mountain and arrived at the gate of the towering sky palace. He saw Yun Yao waiting at the gate. The two of them went forward and bowed to Yun Yao, then Hao Meng bid farewell and left. At the gate of the majestic and solemn palace, only Ji Ling and Yun Yao were left. Ji Ling's mood was a little perturbed, but there was also a faint sense of anticipation. He secretly guessed that he was brought to the Crimson Firmament Peak, where outer disciples were not qualified to approach. It was very likely that there was an important matter. Sure enough, Yun Yao said to him expressionlessly, "Ji Ling, come with me to see the sect master now. Remember, you must tell the truth." If you guys like this book, please give it 5 stars when you review it. Because the system defaults to 3 stars, I hope that you can manually light up all 5 stars. Thank you very much. Chapter 121. Before entering the Sky Pillar sect, Ji Ling had vaguely learned some news. He knew that he was the person the Sky Pillar sect was looking for, and it seemed to be related to a very important matter. So he knew that once he entered the Sky Pillar sect, he would definitely be valued and cultivated. However, he had been in the sect for half a month and had not been valued. He was secretly anxious in his heart, but he could not find anyone to ask. Now he knew that the time had finally come. Hearing Yun Yao's words, his heartbeat suddenly sped up, and his eyes flashed with joy. He did not expect that the Sky Pillar sect's sect master would personally receive him. This importance and honor simply made his blood boil with excitement. However, he remained calm on the surface and respectfully cupped his hands. "I will follow senior sister's teachings." Yun Yao did not answer and calmly led him into the main hall. The main hall was silent, and there was only a figure sitting on the throne at the head. It was a middle-aged man in a golden robe. His face was resolute and handsome, and he had long snow-white hair. His aura was very dignified and powerful. Ji Ling was quick-witted and of course recognized that it was the Sky Pillar sect's sect master. He followed Yun Yao into the main hall and stood still, bowing with Yun Yao. "Disciple greets sect master." "Disciple greets sect master." Chu Tianxing sat on the sect master's throne and looked down at Ji Ling. He could see at a glance that Ji Ling had the strength of the 7th level of the True Element Realm and was about to advance to the 8th level of the True Element Realm. Moreover, he saw that Ji Ling's appearance was dignified, and his temperament and speech were very elegant. He secretly nodded in his heart and had a plan. "You're called Ji Ling? Are you a prince of the imperial family of the Clear Sky Kingdom?" Chu Tianxing stared at Ji Ling and asked calmly. Ji Ling felt a chill all over his body when he was stared at by his wise and calm eyes, as if he had been seen through. He hurriedly lowered his head, cupped his fists and replied, "Yes, sect master." Chu Tianxing nodded slightly and asked again, "Ji Ling, have you seen your great-grandmother or great-grandmother?" This question immediately stunned Ji Ling. Great-grandmother referred to his grandfather's mother. His great-grandmother was his grandfather's grandmother. In the royal family of the Royal Azure Cloud Kingdom, the only living ancestor was Ji Shenxiao. Thus, Ji Ling answered truthfully and shook her head, reporting to sect leader, "This disciple has never seen him before." Disappointment flashed in the depths of Chu Tianxing's eyes, but no one noticed it. He nodded calmly and said, "That's fine. Those are ancestors from 100 years ago. It's normal that you haven't seen them before. Ji Ling, come here. Let me take a good look at you." Although Ji Ling didn't understand Chu Tianxing's meaning, she still walked forward and respectfully lowered her head before Chu Tianxing. Chu Tianxing reached out and grabbed Ji Ling's wrist. He secretly released his powerful spiritual sense to check the situation inside Ji Ling's body. Ji Ling didn't know what was going on and could only stand there quietly, looking very well behaved. In reality, hundreds of thoughts were flashing through his mind. He thought to himself, Sect leader is using his spiritual sense to check my situation. Could it be that he wants to check my innate talent? Fortunately, I have completely refined the God-seizing bead. My dantian is the same as an ordinary martial artist's. Sect leader definitely won't be able to see any abnormalities. A moment later, Chu Tianxing seemed to have detected something and a glint flashed in his eyes. Sure enough, it's the Xianjian bloodline. He exclaimed in excitement and withdrew his right hand and spiritual sense. He turned to look at Yun Yao and said with a gratified expression, "Yun Yao, you've done well. This time, the three of you have done a meritorious service. I will reward the three of you tomorrow." Yun Yao calmly cupped her hands and bowed. "Thank you, sect leader master." Chu Tianxing looked at Jiling and said with a smile, "Jiling, go back to the storm courtyard and cultivate hard. I will ask Deacon Han to send you 2 heaven heart pills and 2 blood spirit pills later. With the help of these pills, your Xianjian bloodline will be refined and your strength will increase greatly. After you pass the assessment and enter the inner sect, if your character is good and your aptitude is good, I might accept you as my personal disciple." Hearing this, Jiling was stunned and revealed an expression of disbelief. He never thought that the surprise would come so suddenly. The honorable sect leader actually said that he would accept him as his personal disciple. Jiling was very clear that Yun Yao was the sect leader's personal disciple and was also the #1 genius of the Tianjin region. She was recognized as the successor to the position of sect leader. In a few decades, after sect leader Chu Tianxing abdicated, Yun Yao would inherit the position of sect leader and control the Sky Pillar sect and the entire Tianjin region. If he was also accepted as a disciple by the sect leader, he would have the chance to compete with Yun Yao for the position of sect leader in the future. Taking control of the entire heavenly stellar region was his lifelong wish. He never dared to imagine that he would be so close to the goal he had been pursuing all his life. Thinking of this, he was so excited that his hands trembled. He was so excited that even his voice trembled. He bowed deeply and said with sincerity, "Thank you, sect master, for your guidance. This disciple will definitely cultivate diligently and will definitely not disappoint sect leader." Although Yun Yao did not speak, a hint of surprise flashed through her eyes. She did not expect that her sect leader would actually say those words himself. She was very clear that becoming the sect leader's personal disciple meant that he would have the qualifications to compete for the position of sect leader in the future. What an amazing opportunity this was! However, she vaguely guessed the reason and did not say anything. Chu Tianxing smiled and nodded. He waved his hand and said, "All right, Jiling, you can go back." Jiling thanked Chu Tianxing again and respectfully bid farewell. He turned around and left the Sky Pillar Palace. After Jiling left, Yun Yao frowned slightly and asked Chu Tianxing, "Master, you just promised to accept Jiling as your personal disciple. Isn't this gift too great? Could it be that he can receive such preferential treatment just because he has the Xianjian bloodline?" The corners of Chu Tianxing's mouth curled into a playful smile. He nodded slightly and said, "Yun Yao, Master naturally has his reasons for doing this. There are still some things you don't know about the sealing array. In fact, there are a total of 2 sealing arrays that suppress the unparalleled demon. The first sealing array was casually set up by the unworldly expert who defeated the unparalleled demon with a single sword strike 1,000 years ago. After 1,000 years, that array has been broken and its power has weakened. However, other than that otherworldly expert or his successor, no one else can control the sealing formation. Our sect's seniors had long expected that the sealing array would weaken after 1,000 years at most, so they would reinforce the array every 200 years. However, this is still not a long-term solution. Our sect's seniors have long been bitterly searching for various ways. At this point, Chu Tianxing revealed a look of reminiscence and recounted in a low voice. More than 100 years ago, our sect had an elder who was proficient in formations. When it came to formations, it was difficult to find a match in the 9 regions of the southern continent. She painstakingly studied for 36 years and finally set up the 9 Dragons Trapping Demon formation to suppress the unparalleled demon beneath the Crimson Firmament Peak. If the 9 dragons trapping demon formation was activated, the first sealing array would be strengthened and the unparalleled demon would not be able to break through the seal. Unfortunately, the elder left the sect when the 9 dragons trapping demon formation was completed. Her whereabouts have been unknown ever since. Chu Tianxing shook his head with a wry smile and said in a low voice, "Speaking of which, that elder was my senior sister." Chapter 122. After listening to Chu Tianxing's explanation, Yun Yao came to a sudden realization and guessed the reason. She frowned and thought for a moment before asking Chu Tianxing, "Master, you asked Ji Ling if he had seen his great-grandmother or great-grandmother? Could it be, you think that Ji Ling's great-grandmother or great-grandmother might be that elder from back then, your senior sister?" Chu Tianxing nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "That senior sister of mine was also an outstanding beauty among the female disciples of our sect. Her talent in the Tao of formations was unparalleled, and many genius disciples were infatuated with her. Unfortunately, that senior sister had already made a promise to someone else, and it was said that she was from the secular world. When Yun Yao saw her master's expression, she guessed that her master must have been infatuated with that elder back then as well. However, she only thought about it in her heart and would not say it out loud. She continued to ask, "Master, that elder set up the 9 dragons trapping demon formation back then. Could it be that you and the other elders have no way to open it?" Chu Tianxing shook his head. "That elder has the bloodline of Xianjian. If you want to open the 9 dragons trapping demon formation, you must use the bloodline of Xianjian as a primer. Whether Ji Ling is that elder's descendant or not, he also has the bloodline of Xianjian. He might be able to open the 9 dragons trapping demon formation." Yun Yao finally understood everything. She nodded solemnly and said, "So that's how it is." Chu Tianxing pondered for a moment and continued, "Yun Yao, I know that suddenly accepting another disciple might make you feel uncomfortable. However, this person concerns the life and death of our sect. I can only do this. I have to ensure his safety and nurture him with all my might. Of course, I want to accept him as my personal disciple because he can open the 9 dragons trapping demon formations. If he can open the 9 dragons trapping demon formation, he will have done a great service to our sect. It is only right for me to accept him as my personal disciple." Yun Yao nodded to show that she understood. She quickly said seriously, "Don't worry, Master. I understand. I have to look at the big picture and will not feel uncomfortable." "That's good." Chu Tianxing nodded with a gratified expression. "All right, you can leave now. Bring Bai Wuchen and Hao Meng here tomorrow to receive their rewards." After Yun Yao bowed and thanked Chu Tianxing, she turned around and left the heaven-raising palace. After Ji Ling left the Scarlet Firmament Peak, she walked alone on the tree-lined path at the foot of the mountain. Even now, he still couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart, and his eyes were filled with a bright light. "Great. This is my, Ji Ling's, destiny. I really didn't expect that the Xianjian bloodline would bring me such heaven-defying luck. Not only will the sect leader nurture me, he will also take me in as his personal disciple. With the sect leader's support and nurturing, I will be able to reach Tongxian realm within half a year. By then, I will be able to pass the examination and enter the inner sect, becoming the sect leader's disciple." Ji Ling's face was flushed with excitement as she fantasized with anticipation. Although Yun Yao is the #1 genius of the Tianqian region and the recognized successor of the sect master, she is still a woman. After I become the sect leader's personal disciple, I will find a way to defeat Yun Yao and take the position of the sect leader. By then, I will be able to achieve my lifelong goal of controlling the entire Tianqian region. Thinking of this, Ji Ling wanted to laugh out loud to vent the excitement in his heart. However, after being happy for a while, he gradually calmed down. He frowned and pondered for a moment before realizing that there was a huge hidden danger in this matter. The reason why the sect leader values me so much and I can become his personal disciple in the future is because I have the Xianjian bloodline. If that's the case, if I didn't use the God-seizing pearl to take away Ji Tianxing's Xianjian bloodline, this great surprise and opportunity would have been his. Not only does Ji Tianxing know that I took the Xianjian bloodline, But even Ji-ku knows that Ji Tianxing is the one who has the Xianjian bloodline. I can't let them leak the news and ruin my great opportunity and luck. For my lifelong dream and ambition, I can't let Ji Tianxing and Ji-ku live. They must die. Thinking of this, Ji Ling secretly clenched his fists as a cold, killing intent flashed in his eyes. He had already decided to kill Ji Tianxing and Ji-ku as soon as possible. This way, no one in the Sky Pillar sect would know the secret of him seizing the Xianjian bloodline. As Ji Ling walked towards the Sky Pillar peak, he was still silently calculating in his heart. 15 minutes later, he was walking on a tree-lined path in the back mountain when he suddenly saw a young disciple in a white robe in front of him. That young man was obviously an inner disciple. He was walking on the path unsteadily, and Ji Ling vaguely felt that he had seen him before. He quickly quickened his pace to catch up. When he reached the white-robed young man's side, he recognized that this person was Jianyu. Jianyu was about the same age as him, and the two of them had known each other 3 years ago. Ji Ling frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he immediately had an idea. He quickly stopped Jianyu and pretended to be surprised as he asked, "You are Jianyu?" Jianyu immediately stopped and turned his head to look at Ji Ling. After seeing Ji Ling clearly, he was also a little surprised. He slightly frowned and said, "Ji Ling? You also entered the Sky Pillar sect?" Ji Ling quickly nodded and said, "Yes, I just entered the Outer Sect's storm courtyard half a month ago." Jianyu didn't say anything, but he thought in his heart, "I didn't expect that this trash prince with a damaged dantian could actually enter the Sky Pillar sect. During the new disciple entrance ceremony half a month ago, I was only focused on looking for Ji Tianxing, but I didn't find Ji Ling at this time." Ji Ling sized up Jianyu and asked doubtfully, "Jianyu, your face is pale and your legs are inconvenient. Are you injured? What happened?" Jianyu expressionlessly replied, "It's nothing serious. You don't have to worry." Ji Ling could see that he was injured and was in a bad mood. He deliberately sighed with a sorrowful face and said, "AI. Originally, Fei Fei was going to enter the sect with this prince. I didn't expect that right before the entrance competition, she would be cruelly killed by that bastard Ji Tianxing." When Ling Yunfei was mentioned, Jianyu's face became even paler. His eyes were filled with hatred and killing intent. "Ji Tianxing. That damn bastard, I will never let him off." Ji Ling saw that Jianyu had fallen into the trap and probed, "Jianyu, Ji Tianxing was framed by someone using the white sun fruit. It couldn't be that you did it, right?" Jianyu glanced at him and said in a low voice, "So what if I framed him? If I find a good opportunity, I will kill him with my own hands and avenge Fei Fei." Ji Ling's face immediately turned solemn and said with a common enemy, "Jianyu, I also have a blood feud with Ji Tianxing. If you want to kill him, count me in." Jianyu's tone was filled with unwillingness as he said, "It's a pity that Ji Tianxing is too cunning. I have already failed once. It will be difficult to kill him again." Ji Ling revealed a confident smile and said in a low voice, "Jianyu, I have a way to kill Ji Tianxing. Why don't we join hands?" Chapter 123. Ji Ling and Jianyu whispered to each other for a while on the tree-lined path. No one knew what the two of them were talking about. A moment later, the two of them seemed to have reached an agreement. They nodded solemnly and parted ways. Ji Ling did not return to the Wind Cloud courtyard. Instead, he went straight to the inner sect at the peak of the mountain. He entered a certain house and stood outside a room. He knocked on the door with a calm expression. After a while, the door opened with a creak. Lu Mingyang saw Ji Ling outside the door and revealed a smile. He asked, "Ji Ling, why are you looking for me?" Ji Ling looked around and said in a low voice, "Brother Lu, I came to find you this time to ask for your help. Come, let's talk inside." Lu Mingyang hurriedly led him into the house and closed the door. After Ji Ling entered the house and sat down, he went straight to the point. "Brother Lu, I have already contacted an old friend. This person also has a grudge with Ji Tianxing. We have decided to deal with Ji Tianxing, but this plan needs your help to be flawless." "Deal with Ji Tianxing?" Lu Mingyang grinned and revealed a sinister sneer. "Good. Ji Ling, tell me, How do you want me to help you? Ji Ling revealed a confident smile and whispered his plan into Lu Mingyang's ear. Lu Mingyang listened attentively. After listening, he could not help but nod. Good. Ji Ling, your plan is very good. Ji Tianxing is dead for sure. He won't be able to escape this calamity. Ji Ling looked at him and revealed a sinister sneer. White Dew Courtyard, the house where the female disciples lived. Ji Ku was meditating and cultivating in her room when a female disciple suddenly called her name outside the door. When she got up and opened the door, the female disciple handed her a letter and said that it was sent by a male disciple of the Wind Cloud Courtyard. Ji Ku thanked the female disciple and returned to her room to open the letter. There was only one sentence on the palm-sized paper. The handwriting was neat and strong. Cuckoo, I will be waiting for you at the pavilion halfway up Jade Sword Peak. I have something to discuss with you. See you there. It was signed by Ji Tianxing. Big brother Tianxing is looking for me? Ji Ku put away the envelope and smiled sweetly. She opened the door with a heart full of joy and subconsciously wanted to go to the appointment. However, when she entered the courtyard, she calmed down and frowned in confusion. If Big brother Tianxing is looking for me, why did we meet at Jade Sword Peak? We just met today. What does he have to discuss with me? Thinking of this, Ji Ku decided to go to the storm courtyard to look for Ji Tianxing to verify the authenticity of the letter. A quarter of an hour later, she entered the storm courtyard and arrived outside Ji Tianxing's room. She knocked on the door several times, but Ji Tianxing did not open the door. The room was also silent. At this moment, the door to the next room opened. A tall and handsome young man walked out and asked with a smile, "Junior Marshal Sister, are you looking for Brother Ji?" Ji Ku nodded and asked, "Is Big Brother Tianxing not here?" The young man with a bright smile replied, "Brother Ji went out not long ago. I heard him say that he had an appointment." Ji Ku already had an answer in her heart, so she asked, "May I ask who you are?" The bright young man smiled and said, "I am Brother Ji's friend. My name is Nye Hao." "Senior Marshal Brother Nye Hao, thank you." Ji Ku smiled and thanked him, then turned around and left. She no longer had any doubts and went straight to Jade Sword Peak. The peak where the outer sect was located was called Heaven Upholding Peak. Jade Sword Peak was behind Heaven Upholding Peak to the right and was about a dozen li away. Behind Heaven Upholding Peak was the peak where Grand Peace Palace was located. Behind it was the sect's core, Crimson Firmament Peak. Ji Ku's heart was filled with Ji Tianxing's words. She was afraid that she would make Ji Tianxing wait for a long time, so she quickened her pace. Ji Tianxing was walking on Jade Sword Peak's mountain path. His footsteps were very fast, and his face was somewhat gloomy. There was a hint of anger between his brows. That damn Ji Ling. I thought that he would restrain himself after entering the sect, but I didn't expect that he would still dare to provoke me like this. He invited me to Jade Sword Peak and said that he had secret information to tell me. This must be his scheme. What does he want to do? As he rushed to the pavilion halfway up the mountain, he was still silently calculating in his heart. Although he knew that Ji Ling took the initiative to provoke him, it was very likely that he had some scheme. But his strength had improved a lot, and he had also mastered the Flying Star Sword art. His strength far surpassed that of a normal true element realm martial artist. No matter what kind of scheme Ji Ling had, he was not afraid. Very quickly, Ji Tianxing arrived halfway up the mountain. He walked along the tree-lined path until he reached the end and saw an octagonal pavilion. The pavilion was surrounded by a dense forest. A young disciple wearing a green robe stood in the pavilion with his back facing him. Just by looking at that figure, Ji Tianxing recognized that it was Ji Ling. When he walked into the pavilion, Ji Ling also turned around and looked at him with a sneer. "Ji Tianxing, you really came." Ji Tianxing looked at him with a gloomy expression and shouted in a low voice, "Ji Ling, cut the crap. What tricks do you want to play by asking me to come here?" Ji Ling revealed a mocking sneer and said in a playful tone, "Don't be agitated. I did ask you to come here because I have important news to tell you. Yes, to be precise, I have a piece of great news to share with you." Ji Tianxing stared at him coldly and shouted, "If you have something to say, say it quickly." Ji Ling was not angry. His smile became even more playful as he said slowly, "This morning, Senior Sister brought me to Crimson Firmament Peak's Heaven-Raising Hall to meet Sect Master. Sect Master personally checked my aptitude and confirmed that I was the person they were painstakingly looking for. Not only does Sect Master think highly of me, he even rewarded me with a large number of pills and cultivation techniques. He also wants to nurture me with all his might and accept me as his direct disciple." Ji Tianxing, do you know why? Ji Tianxing frowned as a cold light surged in his eyes. He shouted in a deep voice, "Ji Ling, did you invite me here just to show off? Put away that disgusting face of yours. You and I both know very well where your talent came from." Ji Ling immediately laughed complacently. That's right. So, Ji Tianxing, I have to thank you. It's precisely because of your Xian sword bloodline that I am highly regarded by the Sect Master. In the future, I can become the Sect Master's disciple and even inherit the position of Sect Master. Hearing these words, Ji Tianxing's expression changed drastically. His eyes were filled with rage as he clenched his fists so tightly that they creaked. With a frosty expression, he shouted angrily, "Ji Ling, don't be complacent. Sooner or later, I will take back everything I've lost." However, Ji Ling laughed even more arrogantly. When is sooner or later? Don't tell me you want to wait until I become the Sect Master's disciple and have limitless glory before coming to take revenge on me? Hee, at that time, I'll be able to kill you with a casual word. Ji Ling, you're courting death. Ji Tianxing could no longer hold back his anger and killing intent as he waved his fist towards Ji Ling. Chapter 124. Ji Tianxing's speed was as fast as the wind, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Ji Ling. His fists flickered with golden true essence, and with a sharp and domineering power, he ruthlessly smashed towards Ji Ling's face. Ji Ling was already prepared, and immediately retreated, jumping out of the pavilion. He dodged Ji Tianxing's attack and jumped onto the tree-lined path. With a mocking sneer on his face, he said, "Ji Tianxing, you'll never be able to defeat me. In the past, now, and in the future, you will always be under my feet. I will let you know what despair is. Go to hell." Ji Tianxing angrily roared, and once again punched towards Ji Ling. The tree-lined path was somewhat narrow, and Ji Ling found it difficult to dodge his attack, so he used a palm technique to block. Tiger Leap Palm. Ji Ling circulated his true essence, and a powerful force burst out from his body, causing his clothes to flutter in the wind. Both of his palms shot out a violent force. Bang bang bang. In the blink of an eye, the two's fists and palms collided several times, producing a few muffled sounds. Although Ji Ling was at the 7th level of the True Essence realm, his true essence was not as powerful as Ji Tianxing's, and he was actually forced back 5 steps. Without waiting for him to stabilize his footing, Ji Tianxing once again punched out. Bang bang. Another few muffled sounds rang out, and Ji Ling blocked 3 punches with his palms, but Ji Tianxing's fist landed on his chest. He was once again forced back 5 steps, his face pale, and the corner of his mouth coughed out blood. Ji Ling. Who is more desperate? Ji Tianxing angrily roared, filled with killing intent, and once again rushed towards Ji Ling. Ji Ling's face was gloomy, and he silently used Tiger Leap Palm, desperately blocking his attacks. The two of them fought in the tree-lined path, their figures constantly twisting and turning, dazzling everyone's eyes. Every time their fists and palms collided, a sharp force would burst out, crushing the flowers and leaves on the side of the path. In a short 100 breaths of time, the two of them had exchanged more than 20 moves. Ji Tianxing, who was at the 6th level of the True Essence realm, was actually forcing Ji Ling to retreat step by step. His face was pale, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. But at this moment, a graceful figure suddenly appeared on the tree-lined path. She was Ji Ku, who had hurriedly rushed over. When she arrived at the pavilion, she saw Ji Tianxing and Ji's figures. Seeing the two of them fighting fiercely, her expression changed and she furrowed her brows. "What's going on? Brother Tianxing asked me to come here. Why is royal uncle here too? Why are they fighting?" Ji Ku murmured in confusion. She rushed to Ji Tianxing's side and shouted anxiously, "Brother Tianxing, royal uncle, please stop. No matter what grudges you have, this is the sect. If you fight in private, you will be punished by the sect." Ji Tianxing and Ji Ling's expressions changed when they heard Ji Ke's voice. A sneer flashed across Ji Ling's eyes as she was secretly pleased with herself. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, was stunned. He turned to Ji Ke and asked in confusion, "Ke, what are you doing here?" Ji Ke was also stunned. She asked in confusion, "Brother Tianxing, weren't you the one who sent me a letter and asked me to meet here? You also said in the letter that you had something to discuss with me, and that we would meet there. So I hurried over." Ji Tianxing frowned and realized that the situation was not good. "Ke, I didn't send you a letter. You've been deceived." Ji Ke's eyes widened. After being stunned for a moment, she guessed that it must be Ji Ling's doing. However, just as Ji Tianxing and Ji Ke were confronting each other to verify the authenticity of the letter, Ji Ling had already rushed over to Ji Tianxing's side. Ji Ling had already taken the opportunity to rush in front of Ji Tianxing. She reached out and untied the belt around her waist. With a shake of her hand, she turned it into a soft sword and stabbed it at Ji Tianxing with a sinister smile. "Ji Tianxing, prepare to die." Ji Ke had just turned to look at Ji Ling when she saw Ji Ling holding the soft sword in her hand and ruthlessly stabbing it at Ji Tianxing's chest. "Brother Tianxing, be careful." At the critical moment, she subconsciously cried out to remind Ji Tianxing. However, by the time Ji Tianxing came back to his senses, it was too late for him to dodge. At the critical moment, Ji Ke stepped forward without hesitation and rushed in front of Ji Tianxing, using her body to block the sword. The soft sound of the blade piercing through clothes and flesh could be heard. Ji Ke's back was facing Ji Tianxing. A black blade pierced through her right shoulder and came out from her back. Dark red blood flowed out from the wound and dyed the clothes on her back red. Ji Tianxing never thought that Ji Ling would be so despicable and sinister as to use a soft sword to launch a sneak attack. What was even more unexpected was that at the moment of life and death, Ji Ke would not hesitate to sacrifice herself to save him. He was so angry that his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. His heart also fiercely twitched a few times as he felt a sharp pain. "Ke." Ji Tianxing cried out in alarm and immediately rushed towards Ji Ke, wanting to save her. However, Ji Ling's reaction was even faster. She had already pulled out her black soft sword and wrapped her arms around Ji Ke's neck, holding her hostage. Ji Ke's body was hit by the sword. Her face was as pale as paper and she had no strength to resist at all. Ji Ling dragged her and kept retreating. She placed the sword on her neck and shouted at Ji Tianxing with a ferocious expression, "Ji Tianxing, if you come any closer, I'll kill her with one strike." Ji Tianxing was worried about Ji Ke's safety. His heart was burning with anxiety and he did not dare to act rashly. He could only stop and stand 5 meters away from Ji Ling. His incomparable anger almost made him go berserk. His eyes were as red as blood as he roared at the top of his lungs, "Ji Ling, you bastard! Ke is your niece. How could you be so cruel to her? Your heart is so vicious that you're worse than a pig or a dog." Ji Ling grinned and sneered with a sinister expression, "Ji Tianxing, you're really ignorant and laughable. Born in the royal family, there has never been any kinship to speak of. If Ji Ke dies today, it will be because of you. She will die because of you." He shouted with a venomous tone and struck the back of Ji Ke's head with his palm, knocking her unconscious. Then, he dragged the unconscious Ji Ke and retreated. After 10 steps, he had retreated to the end of the tree-lined path. Behind him was a cliff. The jade sword peak was steep and straight. From afar, it looked like a giant sword standing on the ground. The cliff was more than 1,000 meters deep, and at the bottom of the cliff was the dense forest at the foot of the mountain. Ji Tianxing approached Ji Ling step by step and shouted with a stern voice, "Ji Ling, what are you doing? Let go of Ji Ke. I promise I won't kill you today." Ji Ling immediately sneered disdainfully, "You won't kill me? But I want to kill you. Otherwise, why do you think I deliberately tricked the two of you into coming here?" "What?" Ji Tianxing immediately glared angrily, his entire body bursting with killing intent. Cuckoo is innocent. You won't even let her go? Ji Ling sneered with a sinister expression. She died for you. You were the one who killed her. With that, he ruthlessly slapped Ji Ke's back and pushed him down the cliff. Chapter 125. Ji Tianxing witnessed Ji Ke being pushed off the cliff and falling down 1,000 meters. His eyes turned red with anger. He glared at Ji Ling, his chest almost bursting with anger and killing intent. At that moment, the unparalleled anger and killing intent made him lose all reason, turning him into an enraged beast. Ji Ling, you bastard! I'm going to kill you! Ji Tianxing roared and unleashed all of his strength, punching towards Ji Ling. Bang, 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 bang. He instantly struck out 4 golden fist shadows, each of which had the power to shatter stone. Ji Ling's expression was grave as he counterattacked with his sword, slashing out black sword shadows that filled the sky, aiming at Ji Tianxing's vital points. The fist shadows and black sword shadows collided, producing a series of muffled sounds. Ji Tianxing was not a profound comprehension expert after all, so he could not use his true essence to condense fist or sword light. A fist made of flesh and blood, even if it contained the power of true origin, would find it difficult to block weapons. He was forced to continuously retreat, and after exchanging a few blows with Ji Ling, he was forced to retreat to the pavilion. Hatred and killing intent made him no longer have any scruples. He immediately activated his sword chi and used the ultimate move of the Flying Star Sword art. 1,000 Feather Blade. Ji Tianxing activated 6 golden sword chi and stabbed at Ji Ling as fast as lightning. In a breath, the 6 sword chi had stabbed over 100 times. The area 3 meters around Ji Ling was covered with golden light, which was extremely dazzling. However, he was suffering unspeakably. He desperately waved his sword to block the sword chi, but he could only block half of the attacks. In the blink of an eye, he was stabbed more than 40 times by the sword chi. His green robe became tattered and became a pile of rags. Although he had the protection of the golden silk armor, which blocked most of the sword chi, his legs were still injured. However, his legs and arms were still pierced a few times by the sword chi, leaving a few bloody holes where blood kept flowing out. The 6 sword chi were still stabbing at an extremely fast speed, and Ji Ling was about to be pierced into a hornet's nest. At the critical moment, a tall and burly young man in a white robe rushed out from the woods beside the path. He brandished his sword and attacked Ji Tianxing. The white-robed youth was Jian Yu. His face was still pale, and his legs were not as nimble as before. However, he glared at Ji Tianxing with a murderous look in his eyes and a ferocious expression on his face. Ji Tianxing, today is the day you die. Jian Yu let out a furious roar and rushed towards Ji Tianxing like a gust of wind. Then, he brandished his sword and sent out 9 dark yellow sword lights. Damned beast, you actually have helpers? Ji Tianxing's expression immediately changed. He hurriedly controlled the 6 sword chis to fly back to his side to block Jian Yu's attack. The golden sword chi collided with the 9 sword lights, producing a series of clanging sounds. Ji Tianxing saw Jian Yu's figure clearly and recognized the swordsmanship he used. His expression changed immediately. It's you. Are you the man in black who tried to assassinate me? You are Jian Yu. Jian Yu's identity was exposed, but he did not panic in the slightest. His eyes were filled with hatred as he sneered, "Hee, you only know now. Don't you think it's too late? You will not be able to escape today. You will die without a doubt." As soon as he finished speaking, Jian Yu once again brandished his sword and attacked Ji Tianxing. Ji Ling also rushed over and slashed out a few sword lights with her sword. She joined forces with Jian Yu to attack. Ji Tianxing was attacked from the left and right by the 2 of them, but he did not panic in the slightest. He controlled the 6 sword chis to assassinate Jian Yu and Ji Ling respectively. In 3 breaths of time, he stabbed out 300 times. The sword lights that Jian Yu and Ji Ling released were instantly shattered by the golden sword chi. The 2 of them were also forced to retreat. A few more bloody holes appeared on their bodies. Their expressions were extremely ugly. Damn it! How can Ji Tianxing be so strong? What kind of sword technique is this? It can actually suppress the two of us? As Jian Yu and Ji Ling continued to retreat, their hearts became heavier and heavier. They originally thought that they would be able to kill Ji Tianxing by joining forces. However, they did not expect that Ji Tianxing's combat strength would be so strong. The sword technique he used was unfathomable. The two of them were actually beaten back by Ji Tianxing. It was simply unbelievable. Finally, the 1,000-feather blade was completed. A ruthless cold light flashed in Ji Tianxing's eyes as he used the Gale Lightning Strike again. Gale Lightning Strike. He let out a low shout and controlled the 6 sword chis. They merged into 2 huge sword chis that were half a meter long and ruthlessly attacked Jian Yu. The 2 sword chis lit up with a dazzling cold light and swept up a violent hurricane. It caused the trees on both sides of the path to sway and the flowers and plants to be crushed. The golden sword chis mixed with the violent hurricane. It was like a half a meter long lightning bolt that ruthlessly struck Jian Yu. Bang! Jian Yu's face was aghast as he waved his sword to block, but it was useless. With a muffled sound, the sword in his hand was sent flying. He was also sent flying 3 meters away and fell into the forest by the side of the road. He struggled a few times in the forest but was unable to get up. He only felt a tingling pain all over his body and dark red blood kept flowing out of his mouth. After Ji Tianxing heavily injured Jian Yu with one move, he no longer paid attention to him and rushed towards Ji Ling like a gust of wind. Ji Ling! You bastard! I will kill you to pay for Ku's life. Ji Tianxing roared as if he had gone mad. He once again activated the sword chis and attacked Ji Ling. Ji Ling saw with his own eyes that Jian Yu was sent flying by a single move. He spat out blood as he lay in the forest and did not crawl out for a long time. He was already pale with fright. When he saw Ji Tianxing controlling the sword chis to attack him again, how could he still have the courage to resist? At this moment, he could only desperately retreat. He was extremely anxious as he shouted in his heart, I miscalculated. I didn't expect that bastard Ji Tianxing to be so strong. Brother Lu, you must come as soon as possible. If you don't come, you can only collect this king's corpse. At this moment, 2 streaks of sword chis came from the left and right. They shone with a dazzling cold light and swept up a violent hurricane as they ruthlessly slashed down. Bang! The sword light and the hurricane mixed together and slashed Ji Ling. It was like a combination of wind and lightning, knocking him to the ground on the spot. He rolled back more than 10 times before stopping. He lay on the edge of the cliff and spat out a large mouthful of blood. He was in an extremely sorry state. Even though he had the protection of the golden silk armor, he was still seriously injured by the wind and lightning and could not get up for a while. Seeing Ji Tianxing walking over with a murderous aura, Ji Ling was immediately filled with despair. However, he suddenly saw Lu Mingyang rushing over with a black-robed man on the path behind Ji Tianxing. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief and pretended to be angry as he shouted, Ji Tianxing, you actually want to publicly kill a fellow disciple for your own personal grudge. You are simply guilty of a heinous crime. Ji Tianxing immediately stopped in his tracks, his brows tightly knitted together. He subconsciously turned his head and looked behind him. He saw Lu Mingyang and a middle-aged man in a black robe. Although he didn't know the black-robed man, he knew very well that he was a deacon of the Sky Pillar sect. Sure enough, Lu Mingyang hurriedly rushed to the scene. When he saw Ji Ling covered in blood, he said with righteous indignation, Deacon, look! Ji Tianxing is so cruel. He actually dared to do such a vicious thing to a fellow disciple in the sect. Chapter 126. Ji Tianxing had a bad premonition when he saw Lu Mingyang appear with the Black Deacon. He immediately understood that this was all part of Ji Ling's scheme. He and Ji Ku were both tricked by Ji Ling, and Jian Yu and Lu Mingyang were her accomplices. At this moment, the Black Deacon walked to the middle of the field and shouted angrily, Stop! The disciplinary deacon is here. Don't you dare be so arrogant. If the disciplinary deacon had come a moment later, Ji Tianxing would have killed Ji Ling. However, since the disciplinary deacon was here, he no longer had the chance to kill Ji Ling and could only reluctantly stop. Ji Ling sneered in her heart but pretended to be on the verge of death. She reported to the disciplinary deacon, "Deacon, you came at the right time. Ji Tianxing, that bastard wanted to kill me. Deacon, you must seek justice for me." The disciplinary deacon looked at Ji Ling and asked in a low voice, "What's going on? Why are you here and why are you killing each other?" Without waiting for Ji Tianxing to explain, Ji Ling spoke first, "Deacon, this is what happened. Ji Tianxing and I both came from Qingyun Kingdom and we had a grudge in the secular world. After we entered the sect, we both entered the storm courtyard. He always wanted to take revenge on me but never had the chance. Coincidentally, I have a niece called Jiku who was cultivating in the White Dew courtyard. Ji Tianxing tricked her to come here and used her as a hostage to force me to submit to him. After I heard the news, I brought Senior Jian Yu to save Jiku. I didn't expect that Ji Tianxing, that evil bastard, would injure Jiku and push her down the cliff. After the matter was exposed, he even wanted to kill me and Jian Yu. Fortunately, Deacon, you came in time. Otherwise, we would be dead." Ji Tianxing was so angry that he was about to go crazy. His body emitted a thick murderous intent as he stared at Ji Ling. "Ji Ling, you despicable bastard. You're worse than a pig or a dog. You clearly tricked me and Jiku into coming here. You were the one who personally pushed Jiku off the cliff. How dare you slander me and slander me? How can there be such a vicious and shameless bastard in this world?" Ji Ling sneered and explained, "Ji Tianxing, you're really funny. Jiku is my niece. I've always doted on her. How could I push her off the cliff? Even if you want to quibble and slander me, please use your brain." Hearing Ji Tianxing's words, the disciplinary deacon frowned and gloomily looked at Ji Tianxing. Just then, Jian Yu crawled out of the woods. He was covered in blood and mud, looking as miserable as Ji Ling. When he saw the disciplinary deacon, it was as if he had seen his savior. He quickly endured his injuries and bowed, "Disciple Jian Yu greets Deacon. I can testify for Ji Ling." After Ji Ling received the news, he invited me to come to Jade Sword Peak to save his niece. Unfortunately, when we arrived, we saw Ji Tianxing pushing Jiku off the cliff. We were so angry that we wanted to capture Ji Tianxing and hand him over to the sect for punishment. I didn't expect Ji Tianxing to be so strong. He actually wanted to kill us to silence us and cover up the evidence. "Deacon, you saw it with your own eyes when you came just now. Everything this disciple said is true." At this moment, Lu Mingyang hurriedly added, "Deacon, I can also testify for Ji Ling. Ji Tianxing has a personal grudge with him and has always been looking for an opportunity to take revenge on him. Moreover, Ji Tianxing stole a spirit fruit from the spiritual herbal garden on the second day after entering the Fengyun courtyard. He was punished by Deacon Han of the Fengyun courtyard. A despicable and sinister person like Ji Tianxing is simply a disgrace to our sect. Now that he has committed such a heinous crime, I hope Deacon will punish him severely." Ji Ling, Jian Yu, and Lu Mingyang were in cahoots. They all insisted that Ji Tianxing killed Jiku and wanted to silence him. Ji Tianxing was so angry that he wanted to go berserk, but he couldn't defend himself. He had no evidence and no one to testify for him. Of course, the disciplinary deacon wouldn't believe him. After a while, the disciplinary deacon asked about the situation and ordered in a deep voice, "Ji Tianxing, Ji Ling, and Jian Yu, this matter is very serious. I will definitely investigate it thoroughly. Before the investigation is completed, the three of you have to follow me back to the disciplinary hall to await your punishment. In addition, I will immediately send orders to send people to search for Jiku at the bottom of the cliff." After that, the disciplinary deacon led everyone away from Jade Sword Peak and returned to the disciplinary hall at the peak of Towering Sky Peak. Ji Tianxing, Ji Ling, and Jian Yu were locked up in 3 quiet rooms in the discipline hall, awaiting the discipline hall's investigation and judgment. Not only that, but the disciplinary hall also sent people to search for Jiku's whereabouts at the foot of Jade Sword Peak. Half a day quickly passed. In the disciplinary hall's 3rd quiet room, Ji Tianxing was sitting in a corner, expressionlessly looking up at the small window on the wall. This quiet room was only 3 meters in radius. There was nothing in the room, not even a chair. The floor and walls were all made of dark brown boulders, and there was an iron window the size of a human head on the wall. Through the iron window, one could only see a palm-sized piece of sky outside. Night had already fallen, and the sky outside the window was gloomy. Ji Tianxing had been sitting in the cold corner for an entire afternoon. His mood had long since changed from anger and irritation to indifference and helplessness. He knew the truth of the matter and had repeatedly told the disciplinary deacon. However, the Sky Pillar sect's rules were strict, and the disciplinary deacon wouldn't believe his one-sided story. Before the matter was thoroughly investigated, the only thing he could do was obediently stay in the quiet room and wait for the disciplinary hall's judgment. He had long since made up his mind that after this matter was over, he would find an opportunity to kill Ji Ling and take revenge. At this moment, he was most worried about Ji Ku, but there was nothing he could do. He could only silently pray for Ji Ku. "Cuckoo, nothing must happen to you. You must not die. I will definitely clear your name and avenge you by killing Ji Ling. I swear." The quiet room was deathly silent, and time seemed to pass very slowly. After an unknown period of time, someone opened the door to the quiet room. A black-robed deacon walked into the room and looked at Ji Tianxing with an indifferent expression. He said in a deep voice, "Ji Tianxing, come out." Ji Tianxing immediately stood up and anxiously asked, "Sir Deacon, have you found Ji Ku? How is she?" The deacon glanced at him and coldly said, "Ji Ku isn't dead, but she's on the verge of death and unconscious." Ji Tianxing finally let out a sigh of relief and muttered, "It's good that she's not dead. I knew Cuckoo was lucky and wouldn't die like this. Come with me," the deacon ordered in a deep voice. Ji Tianxing subconsciously asked, "Has the disciplinary hall finished their investigation and wants to let me out?" The deacon looked at him expressionlessly and said in a deep voice, "The matter hasn't been completely investigated, but it's basically confirmed that you murdered your fellow disciples. However, we still need to wait for Ji Ku to wake up before we can make a final conclusion. Before Ji Ku wakes up, the disciplinary hall has decided to imprison you in the dark wind cave in the back mountain. You should properly reflect on your actions." "What? That's impossible," Ji Tianxing immediately said anxiously. "It was clearly Ji Ling who plotted against me and Ji Ku. Ji Ku and I are good friends. How could I harm her?" "Cut the crap," the deacon coldly said. "You don't have any evidence to prove your innocence, so you must abide by the disciplinary hall's investigation. Come with me to the dark wind cave now." Chapter 127. The night was dark and the wind was howling. Ji Tianxing was escorted by the black deacon to the back of the mountain and into a dark cave. The cave was slanted and extended underground. It was deep and winding. Every 30 meters, there was a stone lamp on both sides of the cave wall that was lit. The stone lamp was an ancient origin artifact. It was lit by a formation, but the light was weak. The dim yellow light could not illuminate the cave, so Ji Tianxing could not see what was going on inside the cave. 15 minutes later, the black deacon escorted him into the deepest part of the cave. In front of him was a dark cliff. Layers of brown rocks could be seen at the bottom of the cliff. To the left of the cliff was a dark and cold stone room. Ji Tianxing was imprisoned in this stone room. Before leaving, the black deacon closed the heavy black iron door and locked it with a large chain. "Ji Tianxing, stay in the dark wind cave and reflect on your mistakes. Don't even think about escaping. If you dare to escape, you will be executed on the spot when we catch you." After saying this, the black deacon turned and left. His figure quickly disappeared into the darkness. Ji Tianxing stood in the cold stone room. His hands gripped the iron bars of the black iron door. He shouted unwillingly, "Deacon, I have been framed. As long as you save Ji Ku, the truth will be revealed." However, the black deacon walked further and further away, completely ignoring him. After a long time, the dark wind cave fell into a dead silence. Ji Tianxing let go of his hands and sat on the stone bench in a daze. There were only two things in the dark and cold stone room. There was an ancient stone lamp on the wall and a rough stone bench in the corner. Other than that, there was nothing else. The ground was covered in dust. Footprints were left behind when one stepped on it. No one knew how long it had been since someone was locked in this stone room. Ji Tianxing did not know how long he would be locked in here. Maybe 2 or 3 days. Or 2 or 3 months. The key to determining how long he would be locked up was when Ji Ku would wake up. However, Ji Ku was first stabbed by Ji Ling, then knocked unconscious and pushed off the cliff. It was already a blessing from the heavens that she didn't die after falling off the cliff. Ji Tianxing found it hard to imagine how serious her injuries were and when she would wake up. He could only wait bitterly. This stone chamber was located deep underground. Other than the faint light from the stone lantern, he could never see the sky outside. During his imprisonment, only darkness accompanied him. At the bottom of the cliff not far from the stone chamber, endless cold wind was blowing, constantly pouring into the stone chamber. Ji Tianxing had only been sitting on the stone bench for an hour when he was chilled by the bone-chilling cold wind and shivered all over. Darkness, coldness, loneliness, and helplessness surrounded him. Boundless rage and killing intent silently rose in his heart once more. Damn Ji Ling! You bastard! Bastard! When I see the light of day again, I will tear you to pieces and burn your bones to ashes. Ji Tianxing clenched his fists, his fingers cracking as he roared at the top of his lungs. It was the first time in his life that he hated someone so much. It was also the first time he saw someone so despicable and sinister, so deranged to such an extent. Even when he was betrayed and humiliated by Ling Yunfei, the anger and killing intent in his heart were not as turbulent as now. Time passed quietly. After an unknown period of time, Ji Tianxing curled up on the stone bench in the corner. His face was blue from the cold wind, and his entire body was stinging with pain. He knew that he could not sit there any longer. This cave was called Dark Wind Cave, and it was specially used to imprison disciples who violated the sect's rules. Naturally, it was used as a punishment. The endless cold wind was his punishment. I have to think of a way to resist the cold wind. If I continue to sit here like this, my flesh and blood will definitely freeze and my meridians will die. The only way Ji Tianxing could think of was to circulate his energy to resist the cold. Fortunately, he had an abundance of vital essence. After the vital essence circulated throughout his body and spread to his limbs and bones, the stinging pain in his flesh and meridians lessened by a lot. This method was indeed effective. Ji Tianxing's emotions calmed down slightly. He abandoned the distracting thoughts in his heart and sat cross-legged on the ground to circulate his energy to cultivate. He followed the third level of the path of the sword and mobilized the vital essence in his body to flow through the 9 main meridians. He wanted to refine the 9 meridians into sword veins. 12 hours had passed, and his power was slowly increasing. His physical body had also adapted to the cold wind that constantly poured into the stone room. An entire day had passed, and the hunger in his stomach made him restless. He had to stop his cultivation and open the 100 treasures brocade pouch to look for food. Fortunately, when the stinky old man detained Qian Yu and the black dragon sword, he did not take away the 100 treasures brocade pouch and returned it to him. He used to store a lot of food and fruits in the 100 treasures brocade pouch for the little ice fox, Qian Yu. After casually eating some fruits and food, his hunger was alleviated, and he started to circulate his energy to cultivate again. Unknowingly, 5 days had passed. In these 5 days, the cave was silent and gloomy. No one had come. Other than Ji Tianxing himself, he did not even see a shadow. He had been circulating his energy to cultivate day and night. When he was hungry, he would look for food in the 100 treasures brocade pouch. Unfortunately, after 5 days of consumption, the little food in the 100 treasures brocade pouch was finally finished. Under the unbearable hunger, Ji Tianxing could only think of another way. He remembered that there were many elixirs in the 100 treasures brocade pouch, so he took out some elixirs and consumed them. He circulated his energy to refine the elixirs and replenish his energy. Experts of the Tongxian realm can abstain from eating. Even if they don't eat a grain of rice for 10 days to half a month, it won't affect them much. Although I'm only at the 6th level of the true energy realm, I can rely on these elixirs to maintain my vital essence and practice abstaining from eating. Abstaining from eating meant that experts of the martial way did not eat and only relied on absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth to maintain their energy. This was something only experts of the Tongxin realm could do. The Tongxin realm was the realm where one could understand the heavens and earth and communicate with the underworld. Martial artists of this realm could transform their strong willpower into spiritual consciousness and communicate with the yuan qi of heaven and earth. They could absorb the yuan qi like water and convert it into their own vital essence. As long as their vital essence was abundant, a Tongxin realm martial artist would not need to eat or drink and still possess great strength. Ji Tianxing had never thought of deliberately practicing abstaining from eating. He wanted to wait until he reached the Tongxin realm and let nature take its course. However, he was in a difficult situation now and had to rely on his strong willpower and endurance to practice abstaining from eating. Unknowingly, another 5 days had passed. In these 5 days, Ji Tianxing only relied on a few elixirs to maintain his vital essence and his strong willpower to endure the hunger. He had actually achieved the initial stage of abstaining from eating. Moreover, he had cultivated in the stone room for 10 days and had successfully refined his first main meridian into a sword meridian. His strength had also increased. Although he had made some progress in the cultivation of the sword heart, he was not happy at all. Instead, he was filled with worry. It's been 10 days. Why hasn't anyone come to find me? Could it be that Ku has been unconscious and hasn't woken up yet? Chapter 128. Ji Tianxing's heart was filled with worry, and his heart was burning with anxiety. He was fine being locked up for 10 days, but he was more worried that Ji Ke still hadn't woken up after 10 days. Could something have happened to him? At the thought of this, he became restless and paced back and forth in the stone room. At this moment, he didn't dare to extravagantly hope that the commandment hall would let him leave Darkwind Cave once the truth was out. He only hoped that someone would come and tell him some news about Ji Ke. At the very least, it would give him peace of mind. However, no one came to Darkwind Cave for 10 whole days. Who would come to see him and give him news? Ji Tianxing sat on the stone bench, his thoughts in a mess. After about 4 hours, the sound of light footsteps suddenly came from the dark cave. Ji Tianxing thought that he had misheard or was hallucinating. He was still sitting on the stone bench, deep in thought with a frown. After 100 breaths, the footsteps got closer and clearer. It was only now that Ji Tianxing was finally sure that he hadn't misheard. Someone had really come. He stood up with a swish and held the iron bars of the black iron door with both hands, trying his best to look into the cave. He saw a slim figure in a long white dress with waist-length hair slowly walking out of the darkness. When she came to the door of the stone room, Ji Tianxing was shocked when he saw her face clearly. "Why are you here? Eldest senior sister, why are you here?" Ji Tianxing thought that the person who came was the commandment hall's deacon, but he didn't expect that the person who came was Yun Yao. Yun Yao stood outside the stone room, only separated from him by a black iron door. She looked at him calmly. Seeing that his face was a little haggard and his body was a little haggard, Yun Yao couldn't help but frown slightly, as if she couldn't bear to see him like this. After a moment of silence, she said calmly, "I know that after that incident, you must be angry and irritable being locked up here. That's why I waited until today to see you. I believe that you've calmed down." Ji Tianxing nodded as a bitter smile appeared on his face. "Yes, I was indeed very angry and irritable a few days ago. But since it has already happened, there's nothing I can do no matter how angry I am. There's nothing I can do if I don't calm down." After a pause, he stared into Yun Yao's eyes and asked in a serious tone, "Eldest senior sister, if I said that Ji Ke was pushed off the cliff by Ji Ling and that I was wrongly accused, would you believe me?" Yun Yao nodded without hesitation and said gently, "I believe you. If I didn't believe you, I wouldn't have come to see you." Ji Tianxing's tense heart suddenly relaxed, and his mood also relaxed a lot. He laughed self-deprecatingly and said to himself, "Yes, I didn't think of that." Yun Yao then said gently, "Don't think about running away. Just wait here for the time being. The truth will come to light eventually." Although the commandment hall is strict and merciless, causing the disciples in the sect to be afraid, the commandment hall has always been fair and impartial. They won't wrongly accuse a good person. Ji Tianxing nodded and asked worriedly, "Eldest senior sister, how's Kuku?" Yun Yao frowned slightly and said in a serious tone, Ji Ku's injuries are too serious. It's already a blessing that he's still alive. She's been unconscious. The elders in the sect are trying to find a way to save her, but they don't know when she'll wake up. Ji Tianxing was even more worried. He gripped the bars of the iron door tightly and shouted with grief and indignation, Damn Ji Ling! This vicious bastard! I'll kill him sooner or later. Yun Yao shook her head with a complicated expression. Junior brother Tianxing, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't fight with Ji Ling. You can't beat him. Why? Ji Tianxing asked unwillingly, could it be that I can only watch him get away with it and not take revenge? Yun Yao sighed heavily. Junior brother Tianxing, Ji Ling is the person our sect is looking for. The sect leader thinks highly of him. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing suddenly remembered what Ji Ling had said to him with a smug expression on his face that day on Jade Sword Peak. Eldest senior sister, that day on Jade Sword Peak, Ji Ling personally told me that he was the person our sect had been painstakingly looking for. The sect leader wanted to nurture him with all his might and even wanted to take him in as a direct disciple. Could it be because he has the Xian sword bloodline? Yun Yao was silent for a while before nodding to Ji Tianxing, yes. Hee. Ji Tianxing's body trembled. Suddenly, he sneered with a strange expression. His eyes surged with an incomparably vicious glint. Ha! As expected, the heavens are playing tricks on me. In the end, the sneer had turned into a wild laughter. That wild laughter was filled with anger and unwillingness, as well as a strong sense of ridicule. When Yun Yao saw Ji Tianxing's crazy appearance, she slightly frowned and felt an inexplicable pain in her heart. This was because she could clearly feel that Ji Tianxing's wild laughter contained a strong sense of sorrow. After a long while, the wild laughter stopped. Ji Tianxing stared at Yun Yao with a burning gaze and asked in a low voice, Eldest senior sister, if I tell you that the Xian sword bloodline was originally my innate bloodline, and that Ji Ling set up a sinister scheme and used the God-seizing orb to steal my life's cultivation and Xian sword bloodline, would you believe me? He knew how shocking these words were, and how absurd they sounded to others. He was even more clear that if other disciples were to hear these words, they would probably treat him as a lunatic who had lost his mind. However, he didn't know why, but when faced with Yun Yao's beautiful face and those clear eyes that seemed to be able to see through one's heart, he couldn't help but want to tell the truth. Moreover, he was also looking forward to seeing Yun Yao's reaction. Yun Yao was stunned for a moment. Her clear and deep eyes suddenly widened, and only returned to normal after a while. A hint of shock and disbelief appeared on her beautiful face. However, she remained silent and stared at Ji Tianxing's eyes for a long time before nodding solemnly. I believe you. Ji Tianxing's body trembled slightly, and an extremely complicated feeling flashed through his heart, but he also felt an inexplicable sense of relief. He revealed a face full of smiles, a very clean and sincere smile. When he was being wronged, when he was in prison, there was actually someone who believed in him. Moreover, this person was the #1 genius of the Tianshan region, Yun Yao, who was like a fairy from the 9 heavens. How could he not be filled with relief? Yun Yao pondered for a moment, then said to him with a serious expression, Junior brother Tianxing, although this news is very shocking, what the sect leader needs is only the Xian sword bloodline. The sect leader doesn't care about Ji Ling's background at all, nor does he care about how he obtained the Xian sword bloodline. Do you understand? The smile on Ji Tianxing's face suddenly disappeared. After a moment of silence, he said with a bitter smile, I understand. Even if I tell the sect leader this news, it won't affect Ji Ling's future, right? Yun Yao didn't reply, but she tacitly agreed. Alright, I should go. She nodded at Ji Tianxing and reminded him again, don't give up, wait for the results in peace. With that, she turned around and left. Ji Tianxing watched as her slim back was gradually swallowed by the darkness. After hesitating for a moment, he asked loudly, Senior sister, I want to ask you one last question. What I said just now, if it was anyone else, they might not believe it. Why are you willing to believe me? Yun Yao stopped in her tracks, but she didn't turn around. After a moment of silence, she said in a calm voice, Because I went to the Qingyun kingdom, and after seeing you a few times, I could feel that you are different from the rest. In fact, I always felt that you were the person the sect was looking for. Chapter 129. Before Yun Yao left, she gave Ji Tianxing 2 Heaven Heart elixirs. The Heaven Heart elixir was a black-grade high-grade elixir, a rare cultivation elixir. With these 2 elixirs, not only could Ji Tianxing continue his anidia for half a month, but his cultivation would also increase greatly. He held the 2 elixirs in his hands and stood at the entrance of the stone room for a long time. Although the cave was still dark and the cold wind was still bone-chilling, he did not feel lonely. Yun Yao came to visit him and was willing to believe in him. To him, this was a great comfort and encouragement. His heart had truly calmed down. Even if he had to endure the loneliness and cold, he was no longer so lonely and helpless. After a long time, he returned to the corner and sat down. He took a blood spirit elixir and continued to cultivate. 2 days passed quickly. Ji Tianxing had refined the blood spirit elixir and his cultivation had more than doubled. He was not far from the 7th level of the true energy realm. Moreover, he had achieved a small success in his anidia cultivation. Although he had not eaten or drunk for 7 days, he did not feel hungry. Moreover, his true energy was flowing more easily and smoothly, reaching a point where he could do as he pleased. Late at night, Ji Tianxing was meditating and cultivating in the corner of the cave. Suddenly, he vaguely heard a rustling sound coming from the bottom of the cliff not far away. He thought it was the sound of the wind from the bottom of the cliff and did not pay much attention to it. However, after a while, the sound of rocks rolling down the cliff came from the bottom of the cliff. Ji Tianxing heard it clearly and was immediately awakened. I'm the only one in this cave. The cliff is so deep that I can't see the bottom. How could there be movement? Could there be some monster or ferocious beast climbing up from the bottom of the cliff? In the darkness, he did not understand his surroundings and could not help but think of many things. He tiptoed to the side of the iron door and pressed his face against the iron railing, trying his best to look in the direction of the cliff. The cliff 10 meters away was still pitch black, and cold winds were constantly gushing out of it. Ji Tianxing stood motionless by the door and stared at the cliff with wide eyes, silently observing. Ordinary people might not be able to see through the darkness, but he was an expert of the 6th level of the true energy realm. His eyesight was 10 times better than ordinary people. He focused his attention on the cliff and could see the lines of the rock layer on the edge of the cliff. About 10 breaths later, a hand suddenly stretched out from the bottom of the silent cliff. It was a palm that was wider than a normal person's, and its skin was light purple. Although the hand looked slender and looked like a woman's hand, it was indeed a little too big. It was even bigger than Ji Tianxing's palm. What is it? Ji Tianxing was shocked. His whole body tensed up, but he held his breath and didn't make a sound. The next moment, a slender figure in a black robe flew out from the bottom of the cliff and landed silently at the edge of the cliff. Even though the robe worn by that person was rather loose and covered 90% of his body, the robe was still quite large. However, the figure under the black robe was tall and slender. Moreover, it was curvaceous. It was obviously a woman. However, the woman's height was astonishing. She was half a head taller than Ji Tianxing, at least 9 meters. The skin on her hands and neck was also light purple. It looked a little weird. Ji Tianxing frowned and muttered to himself, "Why is this woman so tall? And her skin is light purple? Could it be that he's sick? Who is she? Why did she climb out from the bottom of the cliff?" Just as he was filled with doubts and secretly observing the woman in the black robe, the woman in the black robe sensed his breath and suddenly turned to look at the door of the stone room. Ji Tianxing didn't have time to retreat before he was discovered by the woman in the black robe. Swoosh! A black shadow flashed. The woman in the black robe was like a wisp of black smoke. In an instant, she crossed the distance of 10 meters and appeared at the door of the stone room. She stood outside the iron door, half a meter away from Ji Tianxing. There was only one iron door between them. At such a close distance, Ji Tianxing immediately saw that the woman in the black robe was wearing a cold iron mask. Under the mask, there was a pair of big eyes. The pupils were dark red like blood and emitted a cold air of death. Tall body, weird skin color, and blood-red eyes. Is she a member of the alien tribe? Suddenly, this thought flashed through Ji Tianxing's mind. He was full of shock. At the same time, the woman in the black robe silently stretched out her right hand and quickly grabbed Ji Tianxing's forehead. In the center of her wide palm, there was a dark red blood light, which condensed into a blood hand the size of a wash basin. Ji Tianxing was shocked. Without hesitation, he took 5 steps back and barely dodged the bloody hand's grasp. Bang! The huge dark red bloody hand slammed into the iron bars of the black iron door with a dull thud. The black iron bars were as thick as a child's arm. The material of the bars was comparable to a top-grade Xian weapon and was very tough. However, Ji Tianxing saw with his own eyes that the 3 black iron railings were actually bent and twisted by the dark red bloody hand, as if they were as. His eyes widened and his eyebrows twitched. He was shocked. Oh my God! This woman's strength is so terrifying. She has probably surpassed the mystic comprehending realm and reached the primal core realm? When the woman in the black robe attacked, he clearly felt the aura of the woman in the black robe. Her aura was not inferior to Yun Yao's. Luckily, he retreated in time. If he was a second later, his head would have been crushed by the woman in the black robe's bloody hand. Who are you? Why do you want to kill me? Ji Tianxing retreated to the corner of the stone room, 8 meters away from the woman in the black robe, and asked with a face full of anger. The woman in the black robe stared at him with her dark red eyes, revealing a cold, murderous intent. She said in a low voice, "I thought there was no one here. I didn't expect a flea like you to be here. Consider yourself pitiful. I have to kill you. I can't reveal my whereabouts." The woman in the black robe spoke in the human language, but her accent was awkward and awkward. It sounded weird. Ji Tianxing was even more certain that the woman in the black robe was a member of the alien tribe. He stared coldly at the woman in the black robe and said in a low voice, "Woman, you are really vicious. I don't even know you, and I have no grudges with you. You want to kill me? No matter where you are from or where you are going, it has nothing to do with me." His meaning was clear. No matter who the woman in the black robe was or what she was planning to do in the Dark Wind Cave, it had nothing to do with him. As long as the woman in the black robe wasn't very cruel and vicious, she should have turned around and left after hearing what he said. Ji Tianxing said that because he had no other choice. The woman in the black robe was too powerful. He had no chance of winning, so he could only swallow his anger. However, he underestimated the woman in the black robe's cruelty. Since you saw me, you deserve to die." The woman in the black robe laughed coldly. She suddenly turned into a cloud of black fog, passed through the black iron door, and entered the stone room. Her scarlet eyes revealed a cold, murderous intent. She reached out her bloody hand again and grabbed at Ji Tianxing's head. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing's nerves tensed up, and he burst out with all his strength. Wind Thunderstrike. He instantly activated 2 half-meter-long golden sword chi, and slashed at the woman in the black robe from the left and right. The golden sword chi mixed with the violent hurricane, and turned into a half-meter-long lightning bolt, and slashed at the woman in the black robe. Bang! The lightning bolt was blocked by the bloody hand, and a muffled sound was heard. Chapter 130. The Gale Thunderstrike was Ji Tianxing's most powerful move. With this move, he could severely injure Jianyu, who was at the mystic comprehending state. However, the dark golden lightning was shattered by the bloody hand and dissipated instantly. The huge bloody hand was unscathed and grabbed his head at lightning speed. The black-robed woman was too powerful. She was so powerful that Ji Tianxing felt hopeless. He had no chance to fight back. Seeing that the Gale Thunderstrike was broken, he jumped 5 meters to the left without hesitation and tried his best to avoid the bloody hand. Bam! The black-robed woman's bloody hand hit the dark brown wall and left a huge handprint on the wall. Countless pieces of broken stones splattered everywhere. Damned flea, still trying to dodge? The black-robed woman sneered disdainfully. She waved her 2 huge bloody hands and grabbed at Ji Tianxing from both sides. Ji Tianxing tried his best to escape. He dashed left and right in the stone room, looking very pathetic. The black-robed woman's bloody hands missed and slapped the stone wall repeatedly. Bam, bam, bam. They left a few huge handprints. The entire stone room shook. Cracks appeared on the stone wall and countless pieces of broken stones splattered everywhere. Unfortunately, the stone room was too small and there was no room to maneuver. Ji Tianxing tried his best to dodge the fourth attack, but in the end he was unable to dodge the fifth attack from Bloodhand. Bam! Amidst the muffled sound, he was hit on the back by the huge bloody hand. He was immediately sent flying and crashed into the stone wall. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell into the corner of the wall. He was exhausted and his eyes were closed. He had been seriously injured and had fainted. The black-robed woman walked to his side. Her eyes flashed with disdain. She raised her hand, and the huge bloody hand that contained an incomparably violent power fiercely slammed towards Ji Tianxing's chest. If this palm hit, Ji Tianxing would definitely be smashed into meat paste. There was no way he could survive. Bam! With a muffled sound, the huge bloody hand print hit Ji Tianxing's chest. However, he spat out a stream of blood, but his body did not change shape. The ice hornless armor he was wearing had blocked 80% of the blood hand's power at the critical moment, allowing him to survive. However, the black-robed woman frowned and glanced at the ice dragon armor under his green robe. Her eyes flashed with a mocking sneer. She once again raised her palm and unleashed a gigantic blood hand, slapping towards Ji Tianxing's head. Without the protection of the ice hornless armor, his head was about to be smashed into pieces. At this critical moment, a black light suddenly burst out from Ji Tianxing's dantian. The black light contained an icy aura of death. It instantly formed a huge black hole and enveloped the black-robed woman. The black-robed woman was caught off guard and was immediately stunned. In the blink of an eye, her huge bloody hand was swallowed by the black hole. All the energy in her body was quickly sucked away and poured into the black hole like a flood. The mysterious and powerful devouring power wrapped around her tightly, making it difficult for her to move. Her eyes were filled with intense fear. Damn it! What the hell is this? The black-robed woman let out a cry of alarm and struggled with all her might. However, even with all her strength, she could not break free from the black hole's shackles. The more she urged her majestic strength to resist, the faster the black hole swallowed her strength. While she was filled with horror, the black-robed woman stared at the black hole. She could vaguely see layers of gray fog and a gigantic figure standing between the sky and the earth. However, she did not have time to pay attention to these, nor did she have time to investigate what the gigantic black figure was. "High Priest, save me!" The black-robed woman panicked and cried for help. Just as her voice fell, a cloud of black fog appeared outside the stone room with a whoosh and condensed into a tall and sturdy old man. This man was more than 2 meters tall and was as strong as an iron tower. The skin on his hands, feet, and neck was purple. He was also wearing a black robe. His long purple hair was tied into dozens of long braids, and his large feet were bare. It was unforgettable. Like the black-robed woman, the old man also came from the bottom of the cliff. Previously, when the black-robed woman was dealing with Ji Tianxing, he hid in the darkness not far away and was on guard. When he heard the black-robed woman's cry for help, he hurried over to save her. His eyes looked through the cold iron door and stared at the mysterious black hole. His blood-red eyes were filled with intense fear. "Blood Moon Infanta, you shouldn't have provoked this person," the high priest shouted with a grave expression. He stretched out his hand and untied a 3-meter-long black whip from his waist. The whip was made of an unknown material. It was dark purple and covered with fine scales, making it look like a black snake. The high priest shook his wrist and let the whip pass through the cold iron door. The tip of the whip coiled around the waist of the Blood Moon Infanta. He let out a low growl and exerted all the strength he had in his life, pulling the long whip with all his might. The whip lit up with a purple radiance and emitted an extremely powerful force. It immediately pulled the immobile Blood Moon Infanta out of the black hole. Bang! The Blood Moon Infanta crashed into the cold iron door. The door, which was as thick as a palm, caved in and created a large hole. She collapsed on the ground with a dispirited expression. She gasped for breath violently and revealed a look of lingering fear. Too terrifying. 60% of my power was devoured. What exactly is that black hole? How can it have such terrifying power? She looked at the mysterious black hole with a heart full of fear and muttered with a hoarse voice. The high priest also stared at the mysterious black hole and reminded her in a low voice, "Blood Moon Infanta, there was a commotion just now. We have to leave quickly. Otherwise, we will be discovered by the people of the sky-bearing sect." The Blood Moon Infanta glared at Ji Tianxing unwillingly. Then she turned into a black shadow and went out through the bars of the cold iron door. In the blink of an eye, the Blood Moon Infanta and the high priest turned into a ball of black fog and went out of the dark wind cave. In the Crimson Cloud Palace, where the sect master lived on the Crimson Cloud Peak of the sky-bearing sect, in a secret room filled with multicolored brilliance and dense spiritual chi of heaven and earth like clouds and mist, Chu Tianxing was sitting upright in the middle of a formation and cultivating. In the air half a meter above the ground in front of him, there was a black turtle shell the size of a wash basin. The turtle shell was simple and mysterious. It was engraved with complicated patterns and thousands of silver light spots. The edges of the turtle shell were very round and smooth. It was obvious that it was often held in the palm of someone's hand and had been there for a long time. Suddenly, the silver light spots on the black turtle shell changed and moved quickly. In the blink of an eye, they arranged themselves into several strange silver lines. Chu Tianxing, who was cultivating with his eyes closed, sensed the abnormality. He quickly opened his eyes and stared at the silver lines on the turtle shell. After a while, his expression changed and he frowned. He muttered in a low voice, "The star chart shows the aura of the demon race. The demon race has sneaked into our sect. Could it be that the people of the demon race have come for that unparalleled demon?" Chapter 131. Chu Tianxing ended his cultivation and quickly walked out of the secret room. A moment later, he entered the sky-raising palace and let the guards ring the assembly bell. Not long after, many elders in purple robes rushed to the sky-raising palace. There were a total of 12 elders in the sky-raising sect. Except for 3 elders who had matters to attend to, the other 9 elders were all present. After everyone entered the main hall, they saw Chu Tianxing with a dignified expression and a touch of worry between his brows. Several elders realized that something was wrong and hurriedly asked. Normally, the sky-raising palace will not ring the emergency assembly bell if there is no major event. Sect Master, why did you call everyone here in such a hurry? Did something major happen? Could it be that the unparalleled demon under the Scarlet Firmament Peak is about to break through the seal? It's very likely. The only thing that can threaten our sect now is that unparalleled demon. The faces of the 9 elders became dignified, full of anxiety and worry. Chu Tianxing raised his hand and motioned for everyone to quiet down. Then he said in a low voice, "Elders, this king has summoned everyone here because there is indeed a major event to resolve. This matter is indeed related to that unparalleled demon." Just now, there was a change in the star chart. This king observed the star chart and learned that the aura of the demon race has appeared in the sect. Someone from the demon race has sneaked into our sect. This king suspects that those demons have come to rescue the unparalleled demon. Hearing these words, the mood of the elders slightly relaxed and they secretly breathed a sigh of relief. So it's not the unparalleled demon coming out. This old man was worried for nothing. Fortunately, as long as that unparalleled demon hasn't broken through the seal, we still have time. That unparalleled demon has been sealed for thousands of years, but the demons have never been willing to give up. Every few decades, they will sneak into our sect in a vain attempt to destroy the seal and rescue the demon. Yes, we have also fought with the demons openly and secretly. Every time we can beat them back. There is no need to worry at all. Chu Tianxing nodded and said with a solemn expression, "Yes, the followers and descendants of that unparalleled demon have been lurking in the depths of the earth, not daring to show their faces. For nearly 1,000 years, they have been trying to destroy the seal and let the unparalleled demons see the light of day again. Fortunately, the star chart can detect the aura of the demons, so they have returned without success every time. But this time is different. The seal has loosened and the demon has awakened. The situation is very critical. Everyone must not let their guard down. He glanced at the 9 elders and ordered in a deep voice, "This king order you all to lead a team of guards and immediately start searching the sect. Everyone must find the demons who have infiltrated our sect, and kill them on the spot. Even if we can't kill them, we must defeat them and drive them out of our sect." The 9 elders all cupped their hands and bowed, saying that they had received the order. Soon after, everyone took their leave and left the sky-raising palace to carry out their mission and search for the demon race. Chu Tianxing sat alone on the sect master's throne. He frowned and muttered to himself for a while. The situation is critical this time. The seal is already broken. If the demons destroy it, that unparalleled demon will definitely break the seal. Originally, I gave Ji Ling 2 blood spirit pills. I wanted him to use the medicinal power to refine Xianjian's bloodline and increase the success rate of reactivating the 9 dragon-trapping demon formation. But now it seems that this matter cannot be delayed any longer. I must activate the 9 dragon-trapping demon formation as soon as possible to avoid any more problems. After making up his mind, he ordered Yun Yao to bring Ji Ling to the sky-raising palace. After giving the order, he flew out of the sky-raising palace and personally rushed to the Great Peace Palace. Reactivating the 9 dragon-trapping demon formation was no small matter. He had to ask someone for instructions. Only with this person's help could he activate the formation. Chu Tianxing's entire body lit up with scarlet flames. A pair of fiery red wings condensed on his back as he flew in the sky like a large bird. With a flash of fire, he landed outside the Great Peace Palace. A middle-aged mute with a face full of sword scars walked out of the stone house at the entrance. He looked calmly at Chu Tianxing and bowed. Chu Tianxing also bowed and returned the greeting. He said calmly, "Sword slave, please report to Martial Uncle that this disciple has an important matter to discuss." The middle-aged mute called the sword slave nodded. He turned and ran into the Great Peace Palace. His figure flashed and disappeared. Chu Tianxing waited outside the door for 100 breaths of time. The sword slave ran back like a black shadow. He nodded at Chu Tianxing and gestured for him to enter. Only then did Chu Tianxing's expression soften. He hurriedly followed the sword slave into the Great Peace Palace and went deep into the palace. A moment later, Chu Tianxing saw Xiang Wuji covered in the smell of medicine in the pill room of the 3rd courtyard. Xiang Wuji was refining pills. His eyes were focused on the bronze cauldron. He did not notice the medicinal dregs on his hair and beard. Chu Tianxing hurriedly bowed and said respectfully, "Martial Uncle Wuji, this disciple has an important matter to report." Xiang Wuji was still staring at the cauldron. He kept waving his hand and using his qi to control the fire inside. He did not even look at Chu Tianxing. He said without turning his head, "If you have something to say, then say it. This old man is busy refining pills." Chu Tianxing, who was respected by millions of cultivators in the heavenly stellar region, was now acting like a disciple in front of Xiang Wuji. He did not dare to waste time. He hurriedly said, "Martial Uncle Wuji, the star chart changed just now. It detected the presence of demons. There are demons that have snuck into our sect. This disciple has already ordered the 9 elders to search for traces of the demons. But this disciple is worried that a long delay will cause trouble. I plan to immediately bring Ji Ling into the sealing array and reactivate the 9 dragon-trapping demon array." Xiang Wuji's hands paused. He frowned and asked, "Ji Ling? The one that Yun Yao girl brought back from the clear sky country? The one that the star chart said could change fate?" "That's him." Chu Tianxing nodded. "This child is the same as senior sister Qiuyu. He also has the bloodline of Xian sword. He should be able to reactivate the 9 dragon-trapping demon array." Xiang Wuji turned and asked with a serious face, "This matter concerns the secrets of our sect." Chu Tianxing, Are you sure? Chu Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment. Then he nodded. This disciple is sure. Good. Then this old man will go with you to the demon cave. Xiang Wuji did not care about the unfinished pills in the cauldron. He brought Chu Tianxing out of the cauldron. The two used their qi to form a pair of wings. They flew across the sky like big birds and soon arrived at the Red Cloud Peak. When the two entered the sky supporting palace, Yunyao also arrived with Ji Ling. After Chu Tianxing let Yunyao leave, he brought Xiang Wuji and Ji Ling into a secret room in the palace. The secret room was protected by a powerful array. There was also a teleportation array in the room that only Chu Tianxing could activate. When Chu Tianxing used a secret technique to activate the teleportation array, a blazing white door appeared in the secret room. The three of them only needed to step through this door to reach the demon cave beneath the Red Cloud Peak. That was the place where the demons were suppressed. Chapter 132. In the secret room, the white portal lit up. Chu Tianxing was not in a hurry to enter the portal. He looked at Ji Ling with a serious expression and warned him. Ji Ling, this matter is very important and is the sect's biggest secret. When we enter the underground, you just have to do as I say. Don't look around, ask questions, and don't reveal anything. Do you understand? Ji Ling guessed that he was about to come into contact with the sect's core secret. He was about to soar. He was very excited, but on the surface, he still had to pretend to be calm and collected. He nodded at Chu Tianxing and said in a serious tone, I will follow sect master's orders. I will not ask anything that I shouldn't ask, and will not reveal anything. If he could, he would swear on the spot to show his loyalty to Chu Tianxing. Chu Tianxing was very satisfied with his reaction and attitude. His expression softened a lot. Xiang Wuji looked on coldly. He secretly looked at Ji Ling. No one knew what he was thinking. Let's go. We should go in. After saying that, Chu Tianxing stepped into the portal. A white light flashed in the portal, and his figure disappeared in an instant. Ji Ling followed closely behind and stepped into the portal. Xiang Wuji was the last. When the three of them entered the underground cave, the secret room regained its silence. The white portal also slowly disappeared. Ji Tianxing slowly woke up in a daze. He did not know how long had passed. It could have been half a day or a whole day. He only knew that his chest hurt like a knife. Every time he breathed, he felt a burning pain. His mouth and nose were full of the smell of blood. The blood had already dried up. Cough, cough. He coughed twice, and a lot of dark red blood foam came out of his mouth and nose. Such a simple action affected his injuries. He was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. He struggled to get up, but his body was in so much pain that he could not do it for the time being. Helplessly, he could only lie on the cold ground and think about what had happened. I didn't die? Where did that cruel and vicious black-robed woman go? After she knocked me out, she actually injured me so badly. He glanced at his chest. His green robe had been completely burned, revealing the ice hornless armor underneath. However, the ice hornless armor's radiance was also very dim. It was obviously damaged. Fortunately, I have the ice chi armor. It must have saved my life at the critical moment. Otherwise, I would have died long ago. Ji Tianxing heaved a sigh of relief and thought to himself that he was lucky. After resting on the ground for 10 minutes, he finally recovered some of his strength. Only then did he get up and sit in the corner. He looked around and saw that the walls of the stone room were full of cracks and huge holes. The black iron door was also twisted like a fried dough twist, and there was a huge dent in it. Ji Tianxing was filled with shock as he watched. He only felt that the black-robed woman was both cruel and powerful. She actually possessed such terrifying destructive power. Damned black-robed alien. He cursed in a low voice and took out some healing pills from his 100 treasures brocade pouch, stuffing them into his mouth and swallowing them. After that, he sat cross-legged in the corner and began to circulate his energy to refine the pills, using the medicinal power to heal his injuries. The cave was still dark and silent. There was still a cold wind below the cliff, constantly pouring into the stone room. About 12 hours later, half a day had passed. Ji Tianxing finally ended his cultivation. After the medicinal power of the pills, his injuries had basically stabilized and there were no major problems for the time being. However, if he wanted to fully recover, he still had to rest for at least half a month. Ji Tianxing looked at the dark cave outside the cold iron door and frowned as he fell into deep thought. I've been locked up for 12 days. There are only 3 days left until the end of the month assessment. I'm now a criminal. I can't even prove my innocence. What assessment do I need? He laughed at himself and muttered in a low voice, that black-robed woman is from the alien race. I wonder what she's up to in the sect? I hope the sect finds her quickly and kills her or chases her out. I hope Ku wakes up soon. That way, I can prove my innocence and let that damn Ji Ling be punished. After letting his imagination run wild for a while, Ji Tianxing slowly calmed down and continued to circulate his energy to heal his injuries and cultivate. It was late at night. On the Red Cloud Peak, in the hidden secret room in the depths of the palace. The dark secret room suddenly lit up with white light and condensed into a blazing white teleportation gate. In the next moment, 3 figures walked out of the teleportation gate and returned to the secret room. These 3 people were Chu Tianxing, Xiang Wuji, and Ji Ling. However, Chu Tianxing's expression was very serious. His eyes were gloomy and filled with confusion. How can this be? That's impossible. He muttered to himself, full of unwillingness. Ji Ling's expression became even uglier. His empty eyes were filled with unwillingness. He lowered his head and stood beside Chu Tianxing, looking as if he had lost his soul. His mood was extremely gloomy. Xiang Wuji's expression was also very gloomy. His eyes contained a hint of anger, but he had been holding it in. The blazing white teleportation gate quickly dissipated. The 3 of them silently walked out of the secret room and returned to the heaven-raising hall. The light in the large heaven-raising hall was dim. Only the stone lamps on the walls were lit with dim yellow light. Chu Tianxing was silent for a while before saying to Ji Ling, "Ji Ling, you can leave. Return to the storm courtyard and stay there. You can't reveal anything about today's matter to anyone. Otherwise, I will punish you severely." Ji Ling lowered his head with an ugly expression. He could only salute and say, "Disciple understands. Disciple will take his leave." With that, he turned and walked out of the heaven-raising hall, returning to the storm courtyard with grief and indignation. Only Xiang Wuji and Chu Tianxing were left in the heaven-raising hall. The atmosphere was a bit stifling. Chu Tianxing hesitated for a moment before bowing to Xiang Wuji and saying, "Martial uncle." Disciple was incompetent and didn't succeed in reactivating the array. "Martial uncle, please punish me." Xiang Wuji glanced at him and sneered, You are the sect master. How can this old man punish you? Should I punish you by abdicating?" Before entering the devil's den, this old man repeatedly asked you if you had thought it through? Did you find the right person? And the result? That Ji Ling you found couldn't activate the array at all. Even if you are sure that he has the Xianjian bloodline, what's the use of that little bit of bloodline power? The 9 dragons trapping demon array didn't even react. Now it's all for nothing. The array wasn't successfully activated, and this old man even lost 20 spirit stones. Moreover, that Ji Ling looks loyal and honest on the surface, but in reality he secretly knows about the devil's den and already knows our sect's biggest secret. Xiang Wuji was unable to restrain his anger. His entire old face was somewhat distorted, and his white beard flew up in anger. "Chu Tianxing, now tell this old man, how are you going to deal with it? How can you guarantee that Ji Ling won't leak our sect's secret?" Chapter 133. Faced with Xiang Wuji's storm-like questions, Chu Tianxing immediately revealed an ashamed expression. He bowed and lowered his head. After a moment of silence, he said in a deep voice, "Martial uncle, this is indeed Disciple's negligence. Disciple will definitely think of a way to remedy it. Although Ji Ling already knows this secret, he is still an outer sect disciple. I will have the Wind Cloud Courtyard's deacons secretly keep an eye on him. I won't let him leak any secrets." Xiang Wuji nodded, tacitly agreeing with Chu Tianxing's actions. He frowned and said with lingering anger, Chu Tianxing, in the future, you have to think before you make any decisions. Don't make arbitrary decisions. Although you are the sect master, the sky-bearing sect isn't under your control. Even if you were the strongest among your peers back then, you definitely aren't the best candidate to be the sect master. Just like this old man, I was also the strongest among my fellow disciples. But this old man knows his own limits. I definitely won't be the sect master, lest I ruin the sect's 1,000 years of foundation. Xiang Wuji's words could be said to be harsh. He mercilessly criticized Chu Tianxing for being strong but not having the corresponding talent. Chu Tianxing's face alternated between green and white, but he could only humbly accept the advice and didn't dare to refute it. Perhaps because Xiang Wuji had said too much, or perhaps because he was feeling irritated, he took out a jug of wine from his black thumb ring and sat in the main hall, minding his own business. Chu Tianxing didn't dare to dissuade him. He could only take out the simple and mysterious tortoiseshell and silently observe it. He used a secret technique and poured origin energy into the tortoiseshell. The silver dots on the tortoiseshell immediately began to change. A moment later, the silver dots arranged themselves into several lines, forming a mysterious pattern. When Chu Tianxing saw the pattern, his mind shook and his eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Martial uncle. Quickly look, I used the fated star chart to deduce the result. The person we are looking for is actually still in the sect. Xiang Wuji was holding the jug of wine and drinking in large mouthfuls. When he suddenly heard this, he almost spat out the wine in his mouth. He suddenly turned his head to glare at Chu Tianxing and angrily scolded, Chu Tianxing, do you have a pig's brain? You didn't expel Ji Ling from the sect, so of course he's still in the sect. Chu Tianxing hurriedly explained, Martial uncle, the person shown on the star chart isn't Ji Ling, but someone else. Someone else? Xiang Wuji was also startled. His face was full of confusion as he asked, according to the star chart, the person who defied fate came from the imperial Qing dynasty. Since the person who defies fate is still in our sect and not Ji Ling, then things will be easy. Go and check how many disciples we have from the Royal Azure Dynasty and then carefully screen them. Chu Tianxing quickly put away the star chart and nodded, disciple obeys. He hadn't expected the result to be like this. The heavens were actually so fond of the Sky Pillar sect. Although Ji Ling was unable to reactivate the 9 dragon trapping devil formation and wasn't someone who defied fate, the true person who defied fate was still in the Sky Pillar sect. Chu Tianxing finally breathed a sigh of relief. His heart was filled with anticipation. The next morning, Chu Tianxing gathered the 9 elders in the Sky Pillar Hall for a meeting. He sat on the sect master's throne and calmly swept his gaze over the 9 elders in the hall. He asked in a deep voice, yesterday, this seat asked you to investigate the demon invasion. What's the result? Outer Sect Elder Chu Huaishan immediately stepped forward and respectfully reporting to Sect Master, last night we found the invading demons. There were 2 of them, one old and one young. The old man is the high priest of the demon tribe. As for the young woman he brought, her identity is unknown. She should be a noble child of the demon tribe. When this subordinate discovered their tracks, this subordinate joined forces with 2 other elders to besiege them. Unfortunately, they used the smoke catcher umbrella and escaped again. Chu Tianxing slightly frowned. After pondering for a moment, he nodded and said, that high priest is our sect's sworn enemy. Within 100 years, he has infiltrated our sect 3 times in a vain attempt to rescue the demon. Unfortunately, he has the smoke catcher umbrella. Even if this seat personally took action, I might not be able to capture him. You've already done your best. This seat does not blame you. If you can drive them out of the sect, they won't dare to invade again in the short term. After he finished speaking, Chu Huaishan cupped his hands and bowed, then returned to the group of elders. Immediately after, the Spirit Medicine Hall elder took 2 steps forward and reported to Chu Tianxing, reporting to Sect Master, this subordinate has something important to report. Chu Tianxing slightly nodded and asked, what is it? The Spirit Medicine Hall elder calmly said, the Outer Sect's White Dew Courtyard's female disciple, Ji Ku, has been treated by this subordinate and regained consciousness last nights. The internal strife that occurred 13 days ago in the outer sect should also have a conclusion. Originally, there was no need for Chu Tianxing to deal with the internal strife of the outer sect's disciples. However, that matter was related to the outer sect's disciple, Jiling, so the outer sect elder Chu Huaishan had already reported it to him. Now that he heard the Spirit Medicine Hall elder's report, Chu Tianxing pondered for a moment and nodded. "All right, take this seat to her in a moment." This seat wants to ask her face to face. Following that, another 2 elders reported some matters of the sect. They were all ordinary sect matters. Chu Tianxing made a decision on the spot and handed it over to the elders to carry out. After half an hour, the meeting ended and the elders left the Sky Pillar Hall one after another. Chu Tianxing also followed the Spirit Medicine Hall elder. After leaving the Sky Pillar Hall, he rushed to the Spirit Medicine Hall on the Spirit Medicine Peak. The Spirit Medicine Hall was located at the peak of the mountain and was an important place in the Sky Pillar sect. Ordinary disciples were not allowed to approach it. Hundreds of lofty palaces were surrounded by lush, towering trees. The palaces were shrouded in white clouds and thick fog, making the Spirit Medicine Hall seem like a fairyland. In one of the palaces of the Spirit Medicine Hall, there were hundreds of spacious and bright rooms set up with formations. They were specially used to treat the injuries of the sect's disciples. Chu Tianxing followed the Spirit Medicine Hall elder into a room filled with the smell of medicinal herbs and saw 2 women in the room. One of the young girls was Ji Ku. She was lying on the bed with a pale face. Her eyes were dim and lifeless. Clearly, she had yet to recover her vitality. The other young girl was a servant of the Spirit Medicine Hall. She was carefully taking care of Ji Ku, holding a bowl of medicinal soup and feeding her medicine. Seeing the Spirit Medicine Hall elder and Chu Tianxing enter the room, the servant hurriedly bowed respectfully, put down the bowl of medicine and left. Ji Ku couldn't get up and bow, so she nodded in greeting. The Spirit Medicine Hall elder said to her with a kind expression, "Ji Ku, this is our sect master. He specially came to see you and ask about what happened that day. From beginning to end, tell him everything in detail. You must tell him the truth. Don't hide anything." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.